Chapter 220. Take your time. If you were able to kill 20 generals and defeat 300,000 enemies when you were 15 or 16 years old, you should have this kind of momentum now. And San comforted her without any sincerity. Yi Li was too lazy to listen to their nonsense. She turned around and prepared to go down the gate tower, but she was pulled back by Murong-Ting, who had come back at some point. Yi Li frowned. Murong, why did you come back? Murong-Ting snorted and looked down at the gate with a smile. Prince Ding came with reinforcements. I would be a fool if I didn't come back. No, it was you who kidnapped me. I didn't leave at all. Yi Li waved her hand indifferently. We'll talk about this later. I'm going down first. Ayo. Murong-Ting hurriedly pulled her back. She ran down while saying, Are you a woman or not? That's Prince Ding down there. Prince Ding. Moreover, he's your husband. Can't you change your clothes before going to greet him? Look at what you're wearing now. If Tian Xiong and Jing were here, they would miss you to death. Yi Li couldn't help but have black lines on her face. Murong-Ting's character was so straightforward. She was still a girl. At this time, she actually had the time to think about these problems. Murong, this is the battlefield. What's wrong with the battlefield? Isn't the war over? Prince Ding is here. Even if the rebel army comes back, we won't die without you. Come with me. After saying that, he ignored Yi Li's stiff and helpless expression and dragged her to a place not far away from the city gate tower. Murong-Ting's hands and feet were nimble. She was really suitable to be a battlefield medic. Yi Li looked at the neatly arranged clothes and accessories in front of her and couldn't help but praise in her heart. In less than half an hour, she had to run back from the road to Shattered Snow Pass. She also had to find these clothes and accessories that were not easy to find in Yonglin City. Then she had to go up the gate tower to intercept her before the battle ended. She was really well trained. Hurry up, hurry up. After dressing up, we can go and greet Prince Ding. Murong-Ting grabbed the clothes on the table and stuffed them into Yi Li's hands. She pushed her into the inner room to change clothes. She fiddled with the accessories on the table. Yonglin City was small to begin with, and it was not easy to find good things. What's more, it looked like they were going to die today, so no one opened their doors to do business. She had to go to many places to find these things. Yi Li helplessly went in with the clothes. If she didn't move, she was afraid that Murong-Ting would rush in and tear her clothes to change her. The battlefield outside the city had already quieted down. Some people were left to clean up the battlefield, and Feng Zhiyao was ordered to lead the Mohist army into the city to take over the defense. Mo Xiaoyao urged his horse into the city. At the city gate, the remaining officers and soldiers of Yonglin City lined the streets to welcome him. Mo Xiaoyao looked around, but he didn't see the figure he wanted to see. Feng Zhiyao rode beside Mo Xiaoyao and asked curiously in a low voice, Where did Wang Fei go? Just now, when he was outside, he had clearly seen how Ding Wang Fei's hand rose and fell in the midst of the chaos. Her method of taking lives was simply too compatible with Mo Xiaoyao. At the same time, Feng Zhiyao reminded himself in his heart, in the future, he could provoke anyone but Wang Fei. It was too terrifying for a woman to become like this. Ah! I know where Wang Fei went. Feng Zhiyao pointed at the intersection in front of them. Mo Xiaoyao looked in the direction he pointed. Two figures, one tall and one short, appeared on the side of the street. The tall young woman dressed in red was excitedly dragging a woman dressed in blue over. Mo Xiaoyao's gaze was tightly locked onto the delicate and elegant woman. The woman who had been dressed in black on the battlefield, valiant and cold in her killing intent, had a faint helpless smile on her face. Her clothes were light, her wide sleeves fluttering. Her soft black hair was loosely tied up, and there was a pearl tassel hairpin in her hair. Her movements were gentle like the most elegant young woman in her boudoir. Yi Li clearly also saw Mo Xiaoyao. She paused slightly and stopped in her steps. Mo Xiaoyao urged his horse forward. The snow-white steed happily ran in front of Yi Li under its master's urging, and affectionately rubbed its head against her. Li Li. Mo Xiaoyao gave a faint smile. He bent over and reached out a hand to Yi Li. Yi Li raised her hand to grasp his outstretched hand. With a shake, Yi Li was pulled onto the back of the horse to sit in front of Mo Xiaoyao. Then the snow-white steed galloped away in front of Mu Rongting's shocked eyes. It left behind the young woman dressed in red with a dazed expression. A while later, she muttered in a low voice, burning the bridge after crossing the river. This girl didn't even touch a battle horse, so petty. Feng Zhiao, who was on horseback in the distance, looked at the dazed soldiers and the curious Black Cloud cavalry. He shrugged and got off his horse. All right, aren't subordinates supposed to take care of things that must be taken care of when their master is not free? The two rode through Yonglin City and galloped out of the city. The steed was worthy of being called a steed. In the blink of an eye, even shattered snowpass was in sight. Yi Li lowered her head to look at her waist that was hurting a bit. She said in a low voice, "Mo Xiaoyao, where are we going?" Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look at her. He finally pulled on the reins and got off the horse. Yi Li raised her brows and prepared to get off the horse as well. But when she lowered her head, what welcomed her was Mo Xiaoyao's open arms. "Come down." Seeing his insistence, Yi Li could only let him carry her off the horse. Nestled in the slightly cold embrace, Yi Li did not know why, but she only felt a sense of relief and relaxation. The indescribable heat that came from her face made her feel a bit helpless. Raising her head, the elegant and pleasant scent of a man greeted her. Yi Li opened her eyes wide in shock. The man's kiss was like a sudden storm, sweeping over Yi Li while she was still in a daze. Her petite body was tightly locked in his embrace. His slightly cold fingertips gently lifted her helpless face. His warm and moist lips lingered on her bright red, soft and beautiful lips. Mo Xiaoyao's kiss was not gentle, it was even a bit rough. With a bit of tyranny and an indescribable anger, he pried open Yi Li's lips, forcing her to open her mouth and enter. Her helpless fragrant tongue danced with him. "Ooh." Yi Li frowned slightly and wanted to struggle. The arm that clamped down on her waist used even more strength and stubbornly imprisoned her in his embrace. One of his hands gently rubbed the hair behind her head, forcing her to deeply entangle with him and exchange their breaths. Yi Li weakly tugged at the front of his clothes. Xiaoyao, when they separated, the two of them were slightly panting. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and leaned his forehead against Yi Li's smooth forehead. He said in a low voice, "Li Li, you scared me." When he rushed to Yonglin City and saw that scene, no one could understand the shock and fear in his heart. Even he himself did not know what he was thinking at that moment. He just subconsciously shot that arrow. When he saw that arrow shoot through two people in succession, bringing out a beautiful flower of blood, the tyrannical feeling in his heart did not subside at all. If it was not for his amazing self-control, the second arrow would have been shot at Mo Xiaoyao. If he could not block that arrow. If he could not block that arrow, none of the rebel soldiers present today would be able to live. Li Li. Yi Li's face was bright red. For the first time in her life, she was so embarrassed that she did not know where to put her hands and feet. She actually kissed a man on the side of the road where there might be people coming and going, but when she heard Mo Xiaoyao's sigh, all of her struggles and rejection turned into nothingness. Chapter 221. Mo Xiaoyao, it's so good to see you again. Yi Li sighed softly. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head, his deep eyes full of gentleness and warmth. His slightly warm thin lips once again touched her delicate red lips, this time extremely gentle and lingering. "Li, I miss you very much. I really shouldn't have let you come to the southern border alone." Yi Li smiled faintly and didn't say anything. She didn't intend to tell him that after being separated for so long, she also missed him a little. Well, not a little. The well-behaved white horse had already run off somewhere. The place where the two of them were now was only a few miles away from Shattered Snow Pass. The majestic pass was clearly visible. However, Mo Xiaoyao didn't intend to immediately return to Yonglin City or see Murongshan. Instead, he pulled Yi Li to a nearby hillside to sit down and rest. Yi Li leaned against Mo Xiaoyao and sat down. After relaxing her tense body for several days, she couldn't help but sigh comfortably. When she raised her head, she saw Mo Xiaoyao's slightly frowning expression. "What's wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable or injured?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "I've been on the road for several days, I'm a little tired." "Speaking of injuries," Mo Xiaoyao pulled up her left arm and pulled up her wide sleeve, revealing the slender wound on her arm. He frowned and said, "Why didn't you bandage it?" Yi Li didn't expect Mo Xiaoyao to see her injury. She shook her head and smiled. "It's just a scratch, it's not bleeding anymore. It'll heal faster this way." "Nonsense." Mo Xiaoyao scolded in a low voice. He took out several small medicine bottles that he carried with him and used the transparent liquid in one of the bottles to clean her wound. Only then did he carefully sprinkle the medicine powder. Then he took out a white handkerchief from his bosom and bandaged the wound. Yi Li admired Mo Xiaoyao's perfectly bandaged arm and smiled. "It's really fine. I'll be fine in 2 days." Mo Xiaoyao raised his hand and pulled her into his embrace. He stroked her soft hair and said in a low voice, "You're not allowed to get injured in the future. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to go anywhere." Yi Li didn't say anything. Accidents happened all the time. She couldn't guarantee anything. "I'll try my best." "Didn't you suffer a lot on the battlefield?" Mo Xiaoyao's reputation as a young war god wasn't for nothing. He wasn't a god that had descended from the heavens and was invulnerable to all weapons. "Can I be the same as you?" Yi Li looked up and squinted at him unhappily. "Are you discriminating against women?" Mo Xiaoyao said helplessly, "I don't discriminate against women. Even if I did, I wouldn't discriminate against you." His Li Li had left like this. If she was discriminated against, all the men in the world would commit suicide. "Then you're saying that I'm not like a woman?" Li Li. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Are you angry or acting cute?" Yi Li was stunned. She stared blankly at Mo Xiaoyao's gentle smile. She wanted to pounce on him and bite him or beat herself up. She was actually being unreasonable with Mo Xiaoyao. She was even more childish than Murong. Murong definitely wouldn't ask such a childish and senseless question. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. Before she could fly into a rage, he pulled her into his embrace. "Sit with me for a bit. I'm a bit tired." Yi Li moved slightly, but she quickly calmed down. Mo Xiaoyao's body wasn't very good. It was impossible for him to make a miraculous recovery in such a short period of time. Even if he tried to hide it, she didn't miss the tiredness and paleness between his brows. Leaning tightly into his embrace, Yi Li didn't know what she was thinking as she gradually fell asleep. On the side of the official road not far away from the shattered snowpass, a few dark guards were quietly hiding their tracks, protecting their respective masters in the dark. And San lazily hung himself on a large tree with dense foliage on the side of the road. He pointed to a small hill not far away and said to an who was resting with his eyes closed under the tree, "Look at how long they're staying. If they hide there, they'll definitely be discovered by the prince and Wang Fei." An raised his head to look at him. "They're shadow guards, not tracking and surveillance. It's fine as long as they're not discovered. Even if the prince doesn't discover them, he'll know that they're following behind." Shadow guards were supposed to protect their master's safety 24 hours a day. And San rolled around in the tree. "We're also shadow guards." Although they didn't look like it. An expression wasn't good. "We're not qualified shadow guards. When we go back this time, the prince will most likely give Wang Fei a few more shadow guards." And San's expression was also a bit gloomy. If Wang Fei didn't stop him on the battlefield just now, he wouldn't have been injured. And San didn't feel anything wrong with being an arrow for Wang Fei. Ding Wang Fu trained them to be able to block swords and arrows when necessary, blocking all the dangers of their masters. And when Wang Fei went to stop him from blocking the arrow, she was cut. If it wasn't for the prince's arrow, he didn't know if Wang Fei was still alive or dead. As shadow guards, they really weren't qualified. And Xian and Yi were still nowhere to be seen, although this was Wang Fei's order. He and an didn't play the role of shadow guards at all. "I'll ask for forgiveness from the prince. I definitely won't drag you down." An glanced at him. "What idiotic words are you saying? We're a team. If you were replaced, would we still stay? Besides, you're not the only one at fault. I prefer to follow Wang Fei." "Me too." He glanced at the shadow guards on the other side. Before they followed Wang Fei, the life of the shadow guards was too boring. Although they hadn't followed other masters before, just training and listening to the seniors' teachings was very boring. If they didn't follow Wang Fei, they would definitely become as boring as those shadow guards. If we go and ask for forgiveness now, do you think the prince will be lenient? If you go now, you'll only be more unlucky. Enrich said lightly. As a shadow guard with professional ethics, he would never let anyone know that he saw the prince and Wang Fei doing that on the roadside. Of course, that included the prince himself. But the prince and Wang Fei have already stayed here for a long time. If they stay here any longer, General Murong will come out to find them. And San said, tangled. Then let them go invite the prince and Wang Fei. Enrich raised his chin and looked at the shadow guard following Mo Xiaoyao not far away. He believed that they were also tangled. Zi. As Prince's personal shadow guard, their ability to hide was too bad. He and San found where they were hiding with a few glances. Prince, Wang Fei. Enrich stood up from behind the tree and saluted the two people who came together. San in the tree silently landed and also saluted. Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and looked at them. He said lightly, your skills aren't bad. The two people couldn't help trembling in their hearts. Was the prince praising them? Yi Li said with a faint smile, get up, what are you doing here? The two had bitter faces and didn't dare speak. Wang Fei didn't need them to always be by her side, but if they really went to do their own things now, the prince would definitely fly into a rage. Wang Fei could order them, but the prince could replace them. Mo Xiaoyao asked with a frown, where did the other two people go? I remember that you should have 4 people with you. Chapter 222. Yi Li smiled and said, I let them do their work. If there aren't enough people, you can transfer them from other places. The shadow guard is used to protect your safety. Mo Xiaoyao disagreed and said, since these 4 people can't protect you, how about we send a few more when we go back? Or give you the people by my side? Yi Li glanced at San, who quietly gave her a pleading look and helplessly said, I don't like people following me in the dark. They are there to protect your safety. I will let people choose the people with the best concealment ability so that you won't feel troubled. No one can be better than us. San secretly glanced at Mo Xiaoyao and muttered in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao's indifferent gaze immediately fell on him and San's body couldn't help but stiffen. Mo Xiaoyao lightly said, there has never been a shadow guard that needed master to save. Just based on this point, no one is better than you. Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li reached out her hand to hold Mo Xiaoyao's hand and said softly, they have all helped me a lot. You can see that I don't need a shadow guard. I need assistants that I can trust. Moreover, the shadow guard isn't useful everywhere, right? For example, there were some places where the shadow guard couldn't follow, and the places where the shadow guard could follow were usually places where ordinary guards could appear. Moreover, the degree of danger wouldn't be high. Fortunately, there were only a few shadow guards in the Ding Palace who were specially trained to protect their master. The rest had other duties, otherwise it would be a waste of talent. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the 2 shadow guards who had their heads lowered and his eyes slightly narrowed. He lowered his head to look at Yi Li, who was looking at him seriously, and said in a low voice, they can continue to stay by your side. I will transfer another 4 shadow guards to you. Don't. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, I'm not used to the shadow guard. Even if you send someone else to follow me, it won't be long before they become the same as and the others. What's the point? Mo Xiaoyao lightly snorted and turned to walk on the official road. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled, following behind him. And San were left with a blank face. What does Prince mean by this? It means that we can continue to follow Princess. Probably. Broken Snow Pass camp. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao come in, everyone in the tent quickly stood up. Murong Shen personally stepped down from the position of Commander-in-Chief and came forward to greet them. Greetings to Prince and Princess. You is you. You please accept this general's bow. As he spoke, he took off his battle robe and was about to bow down. Mo Xiaoyao reached out and grabbed his shoulder, saying coolly, I am doing my duty. General Murong doesn't need to be so courteous. Mo Xiaoyao didn't allow him to bow, so Murongshen naturally couldn't do it. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's healthy and energetic appearance, a hint of joy flashed through his eyes. He didn't force it and turned to invite the two in. Prince, Princess, please sit inside. Everyone in the tent saw Mo Xiaoyao stride in and their expressions were very colorful. Some were happy, some were shocked, some were deep in thought. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li to a seat below the commander and asked, "General, how is the Nanjiao army?" Murongshen hesitated and then walked back to the main seat, replying, "Nanjiao has been attacking the city urgently these days. They probably want to cooperate with Prince Li's rebel army. Now that the prince and the reinforcements have arrived, we don't have to worry about these Nani barbarians. Tomorrow, we will go out and fight. We will definitely drive these Nani barbarians back to the mountains of Nanjiang." These days, the soldiers of Shattered Snow Pass weren't the only ones who were sullen. Murongshen, the main general, was even more sullen. But no matter how sullen he was, he could only endure it and not show it. Now that the reinforcements had arrived, it was time for him to hold his head high. It's not just the prince. How many troops did he bring this time? The others were also eager to try. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows, saying coolly, 20,000 Black Cloud cavalry and 50,000 troops will arrive in 3 days. The tent was silent. Everyone felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over their heads, chilling them from the outside to the inside. One of them with a straightforward temper stood up in disbelief, saying, "Prince, why would the imperial court send 50,000 troops? Where were the 50,000 Black Cloud cavalry? Where were the 800,000 Mohist army?" Mo Xiaoyao's lips curved into an indifferent smile. "I only came to support first. As for the rest, the emperor has his own arrangements." Everyone was silent. Murongshen sighed in his heart. What else was there to be confused about? The emperor needed someone to support Nanjiang as soon as possible, and only Prince Ding's Black Cloud cavalry could march so fast. But the emperor was also worried about Prince Ding, so he didn't allow Prince Ding to bring too many troops. The real main force was at the back. And the leader must be someone the emperor trusted. In the future, when the chaos was quelled, the credit would naturally be given to the latecomer. The emperor was treating the king's mansion so harshly that nothing would happen. Originally, I thought that after Prince Ding recovered, he would be able to conquer Nanjiang in one fell swoop, continuing the unfinished ambition of Prince Ding. Now it seems that we can only let the Nani go this time. After a long time, Murongshen smiled regretfully. As a general, there wasn't anyone who didn't wish to move unhindered on the battlefield and achieve meritorious deeds. However, now that Prince Ding's body had suddenly recovered, it aroused the emperor's suspicion. No matter what, the emperor would not be willing to hand over such a miraculous achievement like pacifying the southern border to Prince Ding. Mo Xiaoyao smiled indifferently. "It seems that this is indeed a bad opportunity. I'll have to trouble you these days. I will stay in Yonglin for a few days. When the reinforcements arrive, I will leave for the capital." Murongshen was startled. "Prince won't stay in Shattered Snow Pass?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled. "Shattered Snow Pass is guarded by you. I don't need to tell you what to do. And Mo Jingli's more than 100,000 troops are in Yonglin. I still have some personal matters to deal with." Murongshen could only nod. "In that case, Prince, do as you wish." Although it was a pity that he couldn't teach Nanjiao a heavy lesson this time, this kind of thing wasn't something he, a general, could decide. Besides, Prince Ding appeared in Shattered Snow Pass in good health. Just this news was enough to scare the Nani out of their wits. After all, the last war in which Nanjiang was almost wiped out was only 10 years ago. When they returned to Yonglin City, it was already night time. Fortunately, Mo Xiaoyao didn't need to spend too much effort on Yonglin City. Feng Zhiao, who was left behind, had already taken care of everything. Yi Li looked curiously at Feng Zhiao, who had changed out of his gorgeous red clothes and into a green armor and white robe. He looked like a different person in the capital. At the same time, Feng Zhiao also looked curiously at Yi Li, who was still gentle and calm. He really couldn't equate the elegant and beautiful woman in front of him with the ruthless black-clothed woman on the battlefield. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li to sit down in the study. He pointed to the chair next to Feng Zhiao and asked, Leng Haoyu hasn't arrived yet? Feng Zhiao smiled. He just arrived. He went to change his clothes and come over. He encountered some trouble on the way and was chased all the way. He was a bit embarrassed when he rushed over. Chapter 223. Yi Li curiously raised her eyebrows as she looked at Feng Zhiao. Feng Zhiao smiled. He's relying on his wealth to snatch grain from Prince Li, isn't he just waiting for people to chop him up? However, the results aren't bad. He's bought at least 30% of Jiangnan's grain this year. Now that Prince Li has turned around to attack Jiangnan, I'm afraid he'll run out of grain soon. That's why Prince Li has sent assassins to chase him down. How is he going to deal with that much grain? Jiangnan could be said to be Da Chu State's granary. 30% of Jiangnan's grain wasn't a small amount. Feng Zhiao smiled carelessly. Once Jiangnan is in chaos, the price of grain will only skyrocket. It's not like we can't sell it. Even if we can't sell it, we still have hundreds of thousands of people to feed. Sure enough, Leng Haoyu appeared at the door not long after. There was still a scar on his handsome face. Fortunately, it didn't look too serious and wouldn't leave a scar. Your Highness, Princess Consort. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said in a low voice, "You've been here for more than half a year. What's going on in Lingju this time? Why did Mo Jingli suddenly decide to mobilize?" Leng Haoyu looked at Mo Xiaoyao in surprise. Didn't Prince bring people south because he knew of Prince Li's rebellion? Mo Xiaoyao said lightly, "I came here for some matters in Nanjiang. I received news of Mo Jingli's mobilization as soon as I set out. No matter how brainless Mo Jingli is, he should know that he's not completely prepared." Feng Zhiao shook his head. "I feel that Mo Jingli chose a good time. It just so happened that we were caught off guard. Not to mention that we came a few days later. Even if we came half a day later, Shattered Snow Pass might not be able to hold on." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, "If he is really ready, he shouldn't be in such a hurry to congratulate Shattered Snow Pass. He could have divided his troops into two groups. One group would delay General Murong at Shattered Snow Pass, and the other group would march to the east. The southeast region has always been peaceful, and there are rarely any garrisons. As long as he completely occupies the south of the Cloudwater River, not to mention the tens of thousands of men we have now, even if we have 200,000 to 300,000 men, it will not be easy for us to pass through the Cloudwater River and quell the chaos. General Murong couldn't do it alone. It was only a matter of time before Shattered Snow Pass fell. When the time comes, whatever benefits Mo Jingli obtains, he won't need to share with Nanzhao. He's in a hurry to mobilize his troops before he's ready. Does that mean the emperor wants to make a move on him?" Leng Haoyu guessed. Feng Zhiao shook his head and said, "That's not right. If the emperor wanted to do something to him, he wouldn't have let him leave the capital." Leng Haoyu nodded, thought for a moment and said, "King Li's cavalry was indeed sudden. He didn't do anything when he first returned to Ling province, but 3 days later, he suddenly mobilized his troops. At that time, I was also shocked." Yi Li asked, "Why did the prince suddenly rush over?" Mo Xiaoyao glanced at her, took out a letter from his bosom and handed it over. Yi Li took a look at it. It was the letter she sent back before, and there was also a letter that was obviously her grandfather's notes. Looking down, Yi Li said in surprise, "The Saintess of Nanjiang, Shu Manlin, is a descendant of the previous emperor?" This was indeed what Yi Li didn't expect when she sent it. This was too melodramatic. She did guess whether Shu Manlin had other identities, but the Saintess of Nanjiang was a descendant of the previous emperor, and Mo Jingli was the current emperor's younger brother. Then the two of them conspired to rebel. Didn't Nanzhao betray the previous dynasty to establish the country? How could the descendant of the previous emperor call her the Saintess of Nanjiang? Looking at the king of Nanzhao's attitude towards Shu Manlin, it shouldn't be that he didn't know her identity. Mo Xiaoyao said, "The ornament you sent back was a relic of the Chaoyang princess who married into a tribe in Nanjiang during the previous dynasty." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. "So what?" The Chaoyang princess had been Nanzhao for hundreds of years. Feng Zhiao explained, "This Chaoyang princess was a strange woman. It is said that before she was married, she had participated in court politics. But at that time, the emperor didn't like women to participate in politics, and he reprimanded her several times. Later, he sent her to Nanjiang for a political marriage. Although the Chaoyang princess disappeared, the tribe she married into became the largest tribe in Nanjiang at that time because of the support of the previous emperor. At the same time, it was the predecessor of the Nanzhao royal family. The Nanzhao royal family admired the culture of the Central Plains. Although their relationship with the previous dynasty was not good, they were very good to some rebellious ministers of the previous dynasty. From the establishment of Nanzhao until the fall of the previous dynasty, there were at least 3 princes, 2 princesses, and 1 Wangye that could be traced. Some of these people failed in their rebellion, and some fled to Nanzhao because they were framed. Without exception, these people all married or married a direct descendant of the Nanzhao royal family. The last one they took in, although the records are vague, we speculate that it should be the crown prince of the previous dynasty. So, what you are saying is that the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang may be the orphan of the previous crown prince? Yi Li asked, feeling a wave of dizziness. As expected, if you thought the story was melodramatic, the reality was even more melodramatic. Feng Zhiyao said with a smile, in the 3rd year of the previous dynasty's fall, the Queen of Nanzhao married a man of unknown identity from the Central Plains. 5 years later, Nanzhao continued to invade the borders of Da Chu state. It wasn't until the Queen of Nanzhao and her husband died that it gradually calmed down. But in all these years, the 2 countries have been at war and have never truly stopped. As long as there is a chance, Nanzhao will think of ways to invade the Central Plains. Yi Li rubbed her forehead. I understand. So Nanzhao has a very strong bloodline of the previous dynasty's royal family. They plan on taking back the country for the previous dynasty and entering the Central Plains? Taking back the country for the previous dynasty may be fake, but they definitely want to enter the Central Plains, Feng Zhiyao said with a nod. Yi Li looked strangely at Mo Xiaoyao and said, even so, you don't need to rush over so quickly. Since they have prepared for more than 100 years, they shouldn't mind preparing for a few more decades. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her. If Mo Jingli did not raise troops this time, what did you plan on doing? Yi Li stilled and remembered that she had planned on going to the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang to take a look. There is danger. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was not very good. He said, don't you think that the so-called Holy Maiden of Nanjiang is very problematic? Yi Li blinked, waiting for his answer. The Holy Maiden of Nanjiang must enter the Holy Maiden when she is 25 years old. But in reality, most of the Holy Maidens are 21 or 22 years old. The youngest one is even 19 years old and has already stepped down from the position of Holy Maiden and entered the Holy Maiden. No one knows what these so-called Holy Maidens look like, no one knows their family background, and no one knows what they do after entering the Holy Maiden. But these women must receive all kinds of education from a young age. After becoming a Holy Maiden, they even have a certain influence on Nanzhao's political affairs. How much time, money, and energy does it take to teach such a person? Is it just to put her there as a Holy Maiden for a few years and then throw her into some Holy Maiden to die of old age? Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently. Leng Haoyu thought, the prince's words are reasonable. The rules of the Holy Maidens of Nanzhao are really strange. I remember that the Holy Maiden who held the position for the shortest time was only 2 years. She became a Holy Maiden at 15 and stepped down at 17. Chapter 224. I thought we were talking about the dangers of Nanjiang's Holy Land. Yi Li reminded him. Mo Xiaoyao said, there is no such thing as Nanjiang's Holy Land. Maybe there is such a place, but it is definitely not a place where Nanjiang's treasures are enshrined and the Holy Maiden is retired. That should be the biggest secret of Nanzhao's royal family. So once someone touches that place, the Nanzhao royal family will kill them at all costs. That is why there is a rumor that no one who trespasses into Nanjiang's Holy Land survived. Yi Li was a bit disappointed. That meant there was no such thing as the underworld flower in Nanjiang's so-called Holy Land. Leng Haoyu said, this shouldn't have anything to do with Prince Li's sudden attack, right? Feng Zhiyao lazily leaned back in his chair and smiled, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It has a lot to do with it. In the past, We thought it was Mo Jingli who wanted to use Nanjiang's holy maiden and Nanjiao. Now it seems that the fool was used. That is why he attacked in such a hurry. I thought he was smart. A fool is a fool. Yi Li was a bit confused. What bargaining chip can Nanjiao use to persuade Mo Jingli? Feng Zhiao smiled, for example, sharing the world with Nanjiang's holy maiden. With Nanjiao's help, it will be easier for Mo Jingli to obtain the world. When the time comes, there will be no conflict between the country and the beauty. Any man will take the bait. Yi Li couldn't understand. Nanjiao had worked hard for hundreds of years to enter the Central Plains. Was the world really the most intoxicating thing? Their plan is not bad. If they can't break through Shui Pass from the outside, they will break through from the inside. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for the princess, I'm afraid that today, not to mention Shui Pass, there would be no place for reinforcements in Ling Province and Yong Province. Leng Haoyu frowned and asked, "What does Prince plan to do?" Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "I have no plans. It is not safe for you to stay in Jiangnan. Return to the capital as soon as possible." Leng Haoyu moved his lips to say something. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him and said, "I will tell General Murong to have you and Murong Ting get married as soon as possible." "Haoyu?" Leng Haoyu quivered and hurriedly said, "This subordinate understands. Many thanks to Prince for fulfilling my wish." Feng Zhiao said somewhat unwillingly, "It's not easy for us to leave the capital, but we have to end things so hastily. Does the Emperor have to be so guarded against us? What a waste of my time." Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "Nanjiao won't amount to anything. We don't need to worry about it for now." "Don't worry, you won't come for nothing this time." Feng Zhiao raised an eyebrow. "Only you would dare to say that Nanjiao will not succeed. I think the Nanjiao people are not simple. They can spend such a long time to patiently set things up." Mo Xiaoyao's smile was cold. More than 100 years. Generation after generation, if they can't succeed, what can they accomplish? Probably the only thing worth praising is their persistence. Feng Zhiao said with a smile, "I guess the people of Nanjiao hate the Ding royal household the most. For more than 100 years to not succeed, the Ding royal household's contribution could not go unnoticed. For example, 10 years ago, if it weren't for the last-minute withdrawal of troops, the Nanjiao people would never have to worry about the problem of how to enter the Central Plains. Then what does Prince mean when you say you won't let me come for nothing? Are we still going to fight Nanjiao?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyes and smiled, "We're not going to fight. We're going to suppress bandits." "Suppress bandits?" The three people in the study asked in unison. Feng Zhiao's eyes turned and he asked, "I don't remember Yongju having any powerful bandits." Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "There weren't any in the past, but that doesn't mean there aren't any now. Otherwise, what's with the reinforcements from Yongju? Wasn't it Mo Jingli who sent people to do it?" Feng Zhiao asked. Mo Xiaoyao smiled coldly, "Not to mention whether he has the brains or not, even if he does, how many people does the Lingju rebel army need to wipe out 20,000 people? At the time, Mo Jingli's rebel army was still near Yongju. How could he have an army of at least 30,000 people attack the reinforcements from Yongju hundreds of li away?" Feng Zhiao thought for a moment and said, "At the very least, he had to have sent out this army on the same day that he mobilized to be able to make it in time to ambush the reinforcements from Yongju by Yunlan River. Also, he had to know beforehand that Yongju would send reinforcements to Shattered Snow Pass. There are very few people who know that Wu Chengliang is one of us. At least, Mo Jingli wouldn't know. If he didn't know, then he wouldn't have sent troops to ambush the reinforcements from Yongju. That's because Yongju might have done the same thing as the other places and might have sent reinforcements to Shattered Snow Pass. The ones who ambushed official Wu weren't Mo Jingli's people." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. "Nanjiang isn't the only one eyeing the Da Chu state," Mo Xiaoyao said lightly. "Shilling," Leng Haoyu said with certainty. The northern tribes were too far from Nanjiang and the northern tribes' people looked very different from the Da Chu state. It was impossible to infiltrate the Da Chu state on a large scale. But Shilling was different. Even though there were slight differences, that only referred to the Shilling royal family who married foreigners. Most of the ordinary Shilling citizens were not very different from the Da Chu state people. Lung Haoyu couldn't help but shiver when he thought about how there was an army that could wipe out 20,000 people infiltrating the Da Chu state. Mo Xiuyao's eyes were deep and serene. The generals guarding the Da Chu state's borders should have been taught a lesson long ago. Feng Zhiao shrugged. The generals guarding the borders had been replaced by the emperor in recent years. They had no choice. Suppressing bandits seemed like a good idea. Prince, when are we leaving? Feng Zhiao asked excitedly. Since there was going to be a war, there was no need to care about whether it was Nanjiang or Shilling. Mo Xiuyao lowered his head to look at his slender fingers and said in a low voice, "After the emperor's people come to take over Yonglin. Get someone to make the preparations first. Remember, if you let one person walk out of the Da Chu state alive, don't ever tell me you want to go to the battlefield again." "Yes, Prince." Feng Zhiao stood up and replied loudly. He hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Shattered Snow Pass, don't worry about it for now. They won't be able to determine the victor in a few months. We don't have time to care about them." Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice. "Understood." Yi Li quietly looked at the two men answering each other and frowned slightly. She was inexplicably angry and felt uneasy. Outside Yonglin City, King Li's camp, damn it. Why would Mo Xiuyao appear here now? In the tent, Mo Jingli's face was dark and twisted. It was close to June, but it made people feel the bone-chilling cold of the harsh winter. No one dared to speak. It wasn't just because of King Li's anger, but also because they were frightened by Prince Ding's sudden appearance on the battlefield. If there was anything more frightening than Prince Ding's appearance, it would be the appearance of Prince Ding in good health. When they saw the silver-white figure galloping through the air, almost everyone felt a sense of despair and regret in their hearts at the same time. When he was young, he was already known as the god of war. Was Prince Ding, who was known to be more intelligent than his ancestor, someone they could resist? There were even some people who were secretly hesitating and regretting. Was it really the right decision to follow King Li and start a rebellion? The achievement of ascending to the throne could lead to great wealth and power, but the price of failure was also terrifying. Chapter 225. The usually calm military advisor's face was also deathly pale. In their plan, no matter what, Mo Xiuyao would not appear in Yongju so quickly. No, it should be said that Mo Xiuyao would not appear in Yongju at all. But now, a crippled Prince Ding was indeed terrifying, but a healthy Prince Ding who could move freely was even more terrifying. "Prince, has there been any news from the capital?" "Prince Ding." Mo Jingli snorted coldly. "Mo Xiuyao left the capital long before we mobilized. And Yi Li. It's actually her." When he thought about how the person who made the Black Cloud cavalry block his path was Yi Li, Mo Jingli wanted nothing more than to capture her and skin her alive. The military advisor said, previously, it was rumored that Princess Ding went missing. Now it seems that she should have gone to Nanjiao. Previously, Nanjiao sent news that young Master Qingchen was missing. I'm afraid that Princess Ding went to Nanjiao for young Master Qingchen. The more he spoke, the colder the military advisor's heart became. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, Murongshen, and young Master Qingchen, who was very likely to appear. The people in front of them almost made him see no hope of breaking through Yonglin. "Prince, I feel that the plan now is to immediately give up on Yongju and lead the army east. Before the imperial court's reinforcements arrive, we should seize all the areas south of Yunlan River." Mo Jingli said in a low voice. "Mo Xiuyao has already reached Yonglin. Do you think he will let us withdraw?" The military advisor stroked his beard and said, "With Prince's understanding of Prince Ding, with Prince Ding's temper, will he give up so easily today?" Mo Jingli lowered his brows and thought for a moment. He shook his head and said, "Mo Xiuyao was known as Fierce Wind when he was young. He has always been swift and decisive when it comes to war. Based on his temper in the past, he wouldn't give up until the other side suffered heavy casualties in today's battle." The military advisor smiled and nodded. If that's the case, why does Prince think that Prince Ding didn't follow up his victory today? Mo Jingli's eyes flashed and he raised his voice slightly. "He doesn't have enough troops." Military advisor clapped his hands and laughed. "That's right, Yonglin is limited by the terrain, and the Black Cloud cavalry is coming in a hurry. We are unable to see how many soldiers they have. But Prince Ding should know about our military strength. The fact that he didn't press the advantage means that our forces are at least twice as strong as his. Mo Jingli nodded. That's right. How could my brother, the Emperor, allow him to mobilize more than 100,000 soldiers so easily? Not to mention, he wouldn't be able to get there so quickly if he had an army of over 100,000. If that's the case, why don't we? Absolutely not. The military advisor hurriedly interrupted his thoughts and advised, Prince, please reconsider. Prince Ding might not have enough troops, but there isn't any place near Yonglin that is suitable for large armies to engage in battle. As long as he defends Yonglin, we won't be able to do anything to him within 10 days to half a month. After 10 days to half a month, the Imperial Army will arrive no matter how slow they are. At that time, it will be too late for us to return to the east. Saying 10 days to half a month was being polite. With Prince Ding's 20,000 Black Cloud cavalry defending the city, let alone 10 days to half a month, as long as they didn't lack food or weapons, it would be hard to say if they could break through in 2 to 3 months. It must be known that the Black Cloud cavalry's archery skills were something that even the northern militant cavalry feared. It would be difficult for the attacking army to even get close to Yonglin City. Mo Jingli's expression changed unpredictably. There was unwillingness and anger, as well as an undetectable fear. This fear might not be because of Mo Shouyao himself, but because he was the same as all of the Da Chu state soldiers. He had a natural reverence for the Mohist army and the Ding Palace. Prince, as long as we occupy all the places south of the Yunnan River and then firmly defend the Yunnan River, Yonglin will not be able to do anything. Yongju is but a small place, and there is Nanzhao as a restraint. The imperial court is powerless. Now that Prince Ding's legs have suddenly recovered, that person in the capital is probably terrified. This way, he will definitely not use Prince Ding to deal with us. As long as Prince Ding and the Mohist army do not come, half of the Da Chu state will be in Prince Ding's pocket. As for the rest, it is not impossible to slowly plan in the future. The military advisor advised painstakingly. Yongju could not be done. Since it was like before, it would be better to take over all of Jiangnan before the imperial army arrived. Otherwise, it would be like drawing water with a wicker basket. Looking at the wavering King Li, the military advisor felt slightly bitter in his heart. When King Li encountered matters, he was hesitant and indecisive. It was fine to be a rich and idle king, but he was still lacking in conquering the world. Just as Mo Jingli was hesitating, a soldier outside the tent reporting to Prince, there is an emissary from Shilling outside the camp requesting an audience. Shilling. Mo Jingli frowned. What are they doing here? Let him in. Not long after, a middle-aged man with an elegant and kind appearance was brought in. I am He Wu Yuan of Shilling's Zhennan Palace. Greetings to your highness King Li He Ying Li. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes slightly. The military advisor standing beside him was slightly moved. One of the 3 wise men under Genin of Gojosian, Sir Ying Li? The middle-aged man smiled faintly. That is me. Mo Jingli stared at him and said, Sir, he is Genin of Gojosian's right-hand man. Why have you suddenly appeared here with I? He Wu Yuan smiled and said, on the orders of the prince and the crown prince, I am willing to ally with King Li. Ally? The military advisor did not understand. He Wu Yuan smiled and said, I heard that King Li is stirring up trouble in Jiangnan. My prince and the crown prince admire prince's ambition. At the same time, prince should know that Zhennan Palace and Shilling have a blood feud with the Ding Palace of Eastern Chu. Therefore, His Highness ordered me to serve His Highness like a dog and horse. On the day that the prince succeeds, Genin of Gojosian will personally come to Lingju to congratulate the prince on his coronation. Mo Jingli looked at him and asked, what do your prince and the crown prince want? He had long known that there was always a trade-off. He Wu Yuan smiled and said, Shilling does not need prince to pay any price. There is only one thing. Prince Ding and the Mohist army. Prince Ding's legs have already recovered. I presume that the prince has already seen them today? Mo Shouyao was ambitious when he was young. That year, When he was only 14 or 15, he almost destroyed Nanzhao. Now that he has been dormant for several years, I'm afraid that he will be like a tiger out of its cage. No one in the world can stop him. My lord is worried about Shilling's safety. Therefore, he wants to ally with Prince to stabilize the Ding Palace. Please reconsider, Prince. Mo Jingli was somewhat displeased. Although He Wu Yuan said that he wanted to ally with him to fight against Mo Xiaoyao, his words were full of praise for Mo Xiaoyao. He said lightly, Mo Xiaoyao has been idle at home for nearly 10 years. Moreover, he is young, and it may not be good when he grows up. Teacher, you are exaggerating. He Wu Yuan was not angry. He chuckled and said, it doesn't matter if I am exaggerating or not. The Ding Palace is famous throughout history, and Mo Xiaoyao has never tasted defeat in his life. This is also the truth. Could it be that, teacher, he has a plan to deal with Mo Xiaoyao? Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said mockingly. He Wu Yuan smiled and said, although I cannot guarantee that I can defeat Prince Ding, I can help Prince Li stabilize his position in Jiangnan. Oh! Mo Jingli's eyes flashed slightly. He sized up He Wu Yuan with a look of evaluation. He Wu Yuan did not mind and smiled calmly. Prince, do not worry. Prince Ding definitely does not have much time to stay in Yongju. As long as he is transferred away, the court will not be able to stop Prince's momentum even if they send 1,000,000 troops, let alone 100,000. Chapter 226. Mo Jingli was silent for a moment and then said, Mr. He, please go rest. I need to think carefully. Mo Jingli wasn't in a hurry. He nodded and smiled as he said, if that's the case, Prince can consider it carefully. This one will leave first. This subordinate, Feng Zhiyao, requests an audience with Wang Fei. Feng Zhiyao stepped into the elegant and quiet little courtyard. Seeing the female sitting under the shade of a tree reading, he couldn't help but have a headache. 15 minutes ago, when he had been setting up defenses on the city gate tower, he had received a report from Wang Fei's people that Wang Fei had invited him over for a chat. He knew that trouble had come. It was a pity that he didn't have the guts to not come when Wang Fei summoned him. Mr. Feng doesn't have to be so courteous. Yi Li put down the book and turned with a smile. Did I disturb Mr. Feng-san? Feng Zhiyao grimaced. I don't dare. Wang Fei summoned Feng-san. How can I disturb him? Yi Li raised her head and looked seriously at Feng Zhiyao. She smiled and said, Mr. Feng-san seems to be a completely different person compared to when you were in Jing. If it was any other time, I would have thought that I had mistaken you for someone else. Feng Zhiyao could only smile. He felt that the more courteous Wang Fei was to him now, the more troublesome the questions she would ask later would be. Yi Li looked at his forced smile and lowered her eyes slightly. Mr. Feng-san, please sit down and talk. Feng Zhiyao gave his thanks and said, Wang Fei can call me Feng-san. This subordinate doesn't dare to be called Mr. Yi Li waved her hand and smiled as she said, I know that you and Prince have known each other since childhood. In private, you call each other brothers. There's no need to be so distant. Feng Zhiyao could only sit down. Facing Yi Li made him feel even more pressure. He smiled and said, Why has Wang Fei summoned me? Yi Li raised her head to look at him and said in a deep voice, I don't like to beat around the bush. Mr. Feng, how is Prince's body? Feng Zhiyao stilled and hurriedly said with a smile, Prince's body? Wasn't Prince in good health? Speaking of which, after so many years, Prince's body has finally recovered. Wang Fei should be happy. Yi Li looked faintly at him. Her eyes were clear and bright, but there was no naivety in them. Feng Zhiyao secretly complained in his heart. He could only force himself not to move his eyes away and stare at her. After a while, Yi Li smiled and said, Young Master Feng, do you know? Under normal circumstances, a person's true smile can only be maintained for a short period of time, and after this time, it's usually a fake smile. Feng Zhiyao stilled. He blinked and finally took back the stiff smile on his face. Wang Fei's views are very unique. Then, young Master Feng, are you willing to tell me the truth? Yi Li asked with a smile. Feng Zhiyao smiled bitterly. Why didn't Wang Fei ask the prince directly? Yi Li sighed softly. If he didn't want to say it, How could I ask? Feng Jiao said, if His Royal Highness doesn't say anything, it may mean that His Royal Highness's body has indeed fully recovered. Yi Li looked at him and said with a smile, young Master Feng, although I can't tell if he is lying or not, I can't tell if he is lying. But there was at least one thing I understood. A person whose legs have been crippled for 8 years and who has been poisoned, no matter what kind of medicine he uses, it is impossible for him to recover to such a state in such a short period of time. Even if Mr. Chen has found the antidote and healed Prince's legs, it wouldn't be possible for him to recover to such a state in such a short period of time. It's impossible for him to recover to this extent within half a year. If there was really such a miraculous medicine, why would Mo Xiaoyao have to wait for so many years? Feng Jiao looked at her with difficulty. Yi Li did not back down and stared at him. A quarter of an hour later, Feng Jiao helplessly retreated. After thinking for a moment, he said, even if I don't say it, Wang Fei will know sooner or later. Prince used phoenix grass. Yi Li was shocked. She still remembered what Shen Yang had said. The fire poison produced by using the phoenix grass would cause cold and fire to coexist in Mo Xiaoyao's body. Even if he had the intense fire lotus, he would not be able to cure the cold poison in his body. Why didn't anyone stop him? Feng Jiao helplessly lowered his head and said, Prince made his decision, who could stop him? Yi Li's face darkened. Why did he have to? Before she could finish, Yi Li's voice suddenly stopped. She slumped back onto the stool. When Feng Jiao left the capital, the news of Mo Jingli's rebellion had not yet reached the capital. He was, because of her, Wang Fei. Feng Jiao saw Yi Li's ugly expression and understood the crux of the matter. With some difficulty, he comforted, actually, even if it was 2 days later, Prince would still receive the news of Li Wang's rebellion. Prince doesn't have the time to wait for the intense fire lotus 2 years later. Yi Li nodded blankly and said, has Mr. Chen come to Yongju? Feng Jiao nodded. Mr. Chen insisted on coming, but he can't travel long distances and will only arrive a few days later. Yi Li closed her eyes slightly and nodded, saying, I know. Many thanks, Master Feng. Feng Jiao frowned with some worry. Wang Fei. Yi Li waved her hand, saying, it's fine, Master Feng has some matters to attend to first. Feng Jiao looked at her and could only take his leave. Yi Li sat in the shade of the tree, lost in thought. If she hadn't come to Nanjiang, if she hadn't sent that secret letter back, Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have rushed to Nanjiang because of this. Perhaps it was as Feng Jiao said, they didn't have the time to wait for the intense fire lotus 2 years later. Perhaps in the end, Mo Xiaoyao would still take the phoenix grass. But, now Mo Xiaoyao still did it because of her, and San. Wang Fei. And San appeared behind her, looking worriedly at the weak figure of the woman under the tree. Where is Ansai now? Ansan said, Ansai just went to Xiling. Wang Fei previously ordered him to investigate Han Mingyue's matter in Xiling. He should have just entered Xiling's border now. Yi Li nodded, saying, send someone to send him a message, ignore Han Mingyue's matter for now. Think of a way to keep an eye on Sickly Scholar, if he wants to obtain the falling sky flower again. Snatch it at all costs. Ansan hesitated, saying, the falling sky flower is in Nanjiang, why don't this subordinate take people to look for it? Yi Li shook her head, saying, Nanjiao isn't small, and none of us have seen what the falling sky flower looks like. The one surnamed Liang should be in the hands of Tianyi Pavilion right now. No, the one surnamed Liang should also be in Xiling right now. But he's not in Sickly Scholar's hands. Send someone to tell Han Mingxi, what he promised to tell me should be fulfilled. Yes. Ansan nodded, nimbly disappearing behind her. After Ansan left, Yi Li sat for a long time before getting up to return to the courtyard where she and Mo Xiaoyao were temporarily staying. When she returned to the room, she didn't see Mo Xiaoyao. Thinking about it, Yi Li went out and turned to the study in the front yard, but was blocked by 2 shadow guards at the door. Wang Fei, Prince said that he's not seeing anyone right now. Wang Fei, please stop. Yi Li glanced sideways at the 2 shadow guards who didn't dare to look at her, saying, what did you say? Prince said that he's not seeing anyone right now. Also, including Wang Fei. Yi Li indifferently took a step back, saying, I know you're following orders, and I don't mean to make things difficult. But I want to go in now. Chapter 227. The two shadow guards exchanged a look and blocked the door. Wang Fei, please don't make things difficult for us. Yi Li said, if I beat you down, you won't be disobeying orders, right? The two shadow guards looked warily at the woman in front of them. They had seen Wang Fei's skills before. In a situation where they couldn't hurt people, they didn't have the confidence to stop Wang Fei. Wang Fei, I'm afraid it won't work. The shadow guard at the door raised his hand and several figures jumped down from the walls, trees, and rooftops. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and sneered, San, and Sai, take them down. Yes. Two low voices responded. Two figures flashed into the courtyard like lightning, one on the left and one on the right. In a moment, the shadow guards were all subdued. Looking at the other's angry and unwilling eyes, San patted the other's shoulder comfortingly and said, brother, don't be sad. Shadow guards have different levels. Everyone's starting point was the same, so they understood the shadow guards very well, but the other shadow guards didn't understand them. The brothers didn't suffer in vain for the past few months. Didn't they see the results now? It wasn't that they were too weak, but that they were completely out of the realm of the shadow guards. If the situation didn't allow it, San would have laughed to the sky. Yi Li turned back and smiled at the two shadow guards blocking the door. You want me to do it personally? The two shadow guards sighed and moved aside. Wang Fei, please. They were temporarily staying in a rich merchant's residence in Yonglin City. Before Yonglin was surrounded, the owner had fled to Jiang Bay. Rich people were always more afraid of death than normal people. The study in the front yard was very large and even had a bedroom to rest in. So last night when Mo Xiaoyao was resting in the study, Yi Li didn't pay too much attention. After all, he had just arrived in Yonglin and there were many things he needed to do. However, after seeing Feng Zhiyao, Yi Li suddenly remembered that she had not seen Mo Xiaoyao since she returned to Yonglin last night. She had eaten breakfast and lunch alone. If Mo Xiaoyao was really that busy, there was no reason for Feng Zhiyao to be idling on the city gate tower. Furthermore, when Mo Xiaoyao had asked her to help out in the capital, he had not felt the slightest bit guilty. Stepping into the study, there was indeed no one there. Yi Li quickly walked to the bedroom behind the study. Before she entered the door, she heard the sound of something hitting the ground. She quickly rushed in. As soon as she entered, Yi Li's heart trembled at the sight before her. The man who was still valiant and invincible on the battlefield yesterday fell to the ground in a sorry state. The quilt on the bed was torn into pieces and thrown on the ground and the bed. The flower table placed not far from the bed had fallen to the ground, and there were also some porcelain scattered around. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes were tightly shut. His clothes were completely soaked as if they had been soaked in water. His fingers were already stained with blood. Li, get out. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Mo Xiaoyao did not raise his head and only said indifferently. Yi Li's footsteps paused, but she did not stop or turn around. Instead, she quickly walked to his side and helped him up. Are you better? Mo Xiaoyao tiredly nodded and allowed Yi Li to help him back to the bed. He bitterly smiled. Li, it seems like I always let you see my most sorry state. Yi Li indifferently said, this time, you asked for it. We are husband and wife, not strangers. We can't always see each other's most perfect side, right? Mo Xiaoyao closed his eyes and said with a faint smile, it should be said that you have never seen me at my most perfect state. His most perfect state was long gone before he met her. Yi Li reached out and held his hand that was still spasming from the intense pain. She indifferently smiled and said, how could that be? Wasn't it very good yesterday? She lowered her head and looked at the dried blood on his fingertips and the mottled wounds on his palm. She softly asked, when did it start? Mo Xiaoyao, who seemed to have gradually calmed down, was surprisingly easy to talk to. After a while, he said, when the sun was about to rise, Yi Li's hand froze and she felt a sharp pain in her chest. It was already the end of the afternoon. It had been a full 7 or 8 hours. If you don't feel bad, then sleep for a while. Mo Xiaoyao did not reply this time. His shallow and long breaths showed that he had already fallen asleep. But even in his sleep, His brows were still slightly furrowed and he would occasionally show a pained expression. Yi Li wanted to get up and cover him with the blanket, but she found that one of her hands was tightly held by Mo Xiaoyao. Helpless, she could only sit back down and frown as she looked at his sweaty clothes. She hoped that he would not catch a cold because of this. But she couldn't bear to wake him up now. Looking at the heavy shadows in his eyes, she knew that he had not had a good rest in a long time. Mo Xiaoyao did not wake up from his deep sleep until the sun set in the west. Although he had only slept for less than 4 hours, he felt much better than before. Mo Xiaoyao could not help but let out a sigh of relief. This time, it was finally over. "You're awake." Yi Li's voice came from outside. Mo Xiaoyao looked up to see Yi Li walk in with a tray. She put the tray on the table and then looked up to say to him, "Since you're awake, go take a bath first and then eat dinner." Mo Xiaoyao was slightly startled. "Li, why are you?" The scenes before he fell asleep reappeared in his mind. While he was drowsy and in pain, Yi Li's clear voice clearly entered his mind. It miraculously calmed his mind that was about to collapse. Then he listened to that clear voice and slowly fell asleep. Yi Li saw that he was looking at her without saying anything. She walked over and asked worriedly, "What's wrong? Are you still not feeling well? I'll get someone to call a doctor." Mo Xiaoyao pulled her and said, "I'm fine. I just slept for too long and I'm still not fully awake. We can't call a doctor outside right now." Yi Li did not expose his stupid lie. Mo Xiaoyao was probably not unconscious even in his dreams. "Then go take a bath first. I'll get someone to prepare it." Mo Xiaoyao looked down and found that he really did need to take a bath. Mo Xiaoyao quickly finished washing up and walked out with water vapor all over his body. Yi Li hurriedly got up and went forward. Looking at the thin inner clothes he was wearing, she turned around and took a cloak to put on him. Mo Xiaoyao helplessly looked at her and said, "Li, I'm not so weak that I can't even stand up to the wind." Yi Li nodded and said seriously, "Yes, I can't even stand up to the wind. Compared to you, it's too easy. Sit down and eat." Yi Li put a bowl of fragrant and delicious porridge into his hands and watched him eat. Mo Xiaoyao could only lower his head to taste it. Not only was it fragrant, it was also very delicious. Mo Xiaoyao, who had not eaten anything since last night, felt his stomach warm up. His appetite, which had not wanted to eat because of his exhaustion and pain, suddenly became much better. It doesn't look like it was made by them. The master of this palace had passed away a long time ago, so there were no servants. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li could not use people of unknown origins when they lived here, so their basic necessities were taken care of by the shadow guards. Even though the palace's shadow guards were well trained, the food they made was only at a level that was edible. Yi Li propped up her chin and watched him eat. "Is it not good that I made it?" Chapter 228. Mo Xiaoyao paused and shook his head with a smile. "No, it's delicious." Yi Li nodded with satisfaction. Her cooking skills were not that good, but cooking some home-cooked dishes and porridge was not difficult for her. The chicken porridge took her 2 hours to cook. She tasted it herself and found that the taste was acceptable. "Does Miss Li have something to say to me?" Mo Xiaoyao put down the bowl in his hand and asked when he saw Yi Li's eyes staring at him. Yi Li took the bowl and filled it with porridge for him. She said, "I personally think that it's not good to force yourself to do everything alone. It's also not the way husband and wife should get along. What do you think, Prince?" Mo Xiaoyao helplessly took the bowl from her and sighed. "You know, Miss Li, it's not because of you. You know, the poison in my body can't be cured for now. It's only a matter of time before I reach this step. Whether it's because of me or not, isn't it already like this? What I'm saying is, Prince, aren't you afraid that you'll kill yourself by locking yourself in the room?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked. "I won't." Mo Xiaoyao said, "I won't die. The phoenix grass won't kill me. Mr. Shen also said that it will only make me feel a little pain. Just feel a little pain." Yi Li couldn't help but want to pry open his head to see what was inside. "Miss Li, you know that this is the best situation for now. If Mr. Shen doesn't bring back the phoenix grass, Then he wouldn't be able to help Yonglin in time. Shattered Snow Pass would be broken and the people of Nanjiao would enter. Miss Li, I'll accompany you in the future. Yi Li said lightly. Okay. Under a big tree in the courtyard, Mo Xiaoyao leaned against the tree and sat leisurely. His gentle gaze fell on the slender woman in the courtyard who was reaching out with her hand. A gleaming dagger flickered in and out of Yi Li's hand. Her nimble body shuttled between the wooden figurines in all sorts of postures. In just a short moment, all of the wooden figurines had obvious wounds on their necks and chests. Yi Li's performance was not very enjoyable. Instead, it was filled with a biting cold murderous intent. But in the eyes of the people in the courtyard, it was more captivating than any dance in the world. The shadow guards hiding in the shadows could not help but secretly swipe at their necks, wondering if they could dodge the dagger in Wang Fei's hand. Feng Zhiyao, who rarely had free time, also couldn't help but peek at Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting under the tree with a calm and even gentle expression. He cursed inside, of all the noble misses, to be able to choose such a vicious Wang Fei for the prince, the emperor's eyes must be very bad. Li Wang's action of breaking off the engagement was correct. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to death by Wang Fei. Yi Li put away the dagger in her hand and furrowed her brow. She was clearly dissatisfied. She turned and walked towards where Mo Xiaoyao was sitting under the tree. Miss Li's internal power is slightly lacking, but her close combat skills are very good. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said with a slight smile. However, internal power could not be recovered in a short period of time. With Miss Li's status, there were not many experts that needed her to fight. At least, Yi Li's present skills were far beyond Mo Xiaoyao's expectations. Yi Li nodded slightly and said with a frown, lacking internal power is a weakness. I will think of another way. As for encountering a top expert, I will think about it later. Feng Zhiyao looked with slight terror at her. Wang Fei, are you telling me that with your skills, you can think of a way to deal with a top expert? Yi Li propped up her chin and said, that depends on how high the expert is. If one palm can destroy a house 10 zhong away, then it may be difficult. Feng Zhiyao looked at the sky and rolled his eyes. Who has ever seen an expert that defies the natural order? It's impossible to reach that level, all right? What did she think power was? To be able to break a large tree with one palm was already a very high level of internal power, but to destroy a house 10 zhong away? Yi Li nodded seriously and said, I also feel that there shouldn't be such an ability. Feng Zhiyao asked curiously, then how does Wang Fei want to deal with a top expert? Yi Li blinked and said calmly, with my own strength, it may be difficult to deal with an expert like Prince. However, it shouldn't be a problem to escape unharmed. As she spoke, Yi Li couldn't help but look at Mo Xiaoyao. As a person who had been disabled for almost 10 years, even if Mo Xiaoyao's martial arts hadn't deteriorated, it should have stopped at 17 or 18 years old. But she had discovered in the past few days that Mo Xiaoyao's martial arts were still unfathomably deep. At least, she didn't have any chance of winning against him. This made Yi Li, who had always been very confident in her own skills, feel slightly depressed. Feng Zhiyao didn't know what expression to make. What's with your depressed and regretful face? Do you think there are many people who can escape unharmed from Prince? If it's like this, then Wang Fei's skills are enough. After all, there are no more than 3 people in the world who can compare to Prince in martial arts, Feng Zhiyao said. Which 3? Yi Li asked curiously. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his nose and said, Yangwang Chamber's Great Pavilion Master Ling Taihan, Shilling Genom of Gojosian, and our Da Chu State's #1 expert Mu Qingtsang. However, Genom of Gojosian lost an arm on the battlefield, so his martial arts may have deteriorated. However, these people probably won't make a move against Wang Fei, so there's no need to worry. Yi Li rolled her eyes at him and said, I don't have a persecutory delusion. Increasing my own strength has nothing to do with whether or not someone will make a move against me. Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but wipe his sweat. You still want to increase your strength. If you need anything, just have someone do it. If you need people, you can just transfer them from the Shadow Guard and the Black Cloud Cavalry. Mo Xiaoyao said softly. Since the future was destined to not be peaceful, He did not object to Yi Li using any method to increase her own strength. Even if it was just to protect herself, an extra bit of strength meant an extra bit of safety. Feng Zhiao looked at Mo Xiaoyao with slight surprise and raised an eyebrow. It seemed that Prince truly placed great importance on this Wang Fei. At least, the amount of authority he gave Wang Fei could be said to be the highest in the history of Princess Ding other than the first Ding country Wang Fei. No, perhaps it was not any worse than the first Princess Ding because the prince had almost tacitly given Wang Fei all authority over the Black Cloud Cavalry. Reporting to Prince Wang Fei. General Murong requests an audience. Also, the reinforcements from the court have arrived, the guard at the gate reported. Feng Zhiao raised an eyebrow. They are not slow. Which general is leading them? The guard reported, it is General Liu Jingyun, the emperor's newly appointed bandit-suppressing general. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly, let them in. The guard hesitated and then said, General Liu has not entered the city yet. Do you want I to personally go out of the city to welcome him? Mo Xiaoyao's voice was light, but it made people feel an invisible pressure cover the sky. The guard immediately bowed decisively and said, this subordinate accepts the order. He turned and hurriedly left to pass the message for the prince to go out of the city to welcome him. What kind of joke was this? Who is this Liu Jingyun? Feng Zhiao scratched his head and thought hard. Was the shadow guard that he had led so bad that they did not even know that the emperor had such a trusted general? Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, Prime Minister Liu is the son of a concubine of the deceased fourth young master. He is ranked 11th in the Liu family. He should be 27 years old this year. Feng Zhiao frowned, concubine Liu's nephew? Could it be that the emperor had really gone mad from anger because of Mo Jingli? It's not like there's no one else in the court. How could they send someone who has never been on the battlefield to quell the rebellion? Even asking the old Hua Guo to come out of retirement is better than getting someone who can't do anything. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, the emperor won't use the Hua family. Feng Zhiao laughed coldly with disdain, so he'll use the Liu family? Of course, he knew that the emperor was guarding against the Hua family. Otherwise, as the eldest Di daughter of the Hua family, how could the empress only have one princess? The Hua family had already reached the peak of prosperity. In the past, the Hua family had a very good relationship with Himo Liufang. How could the emperor not be on guard? Chapter 229. In the eyes of the emperor, the Liu family is obviously more loyal than the Hua family and easier to control. Mo Xiaoyao calmly pointed out the truth. Feng Zhiao nodded and said mockingly, isn't that so? If the Liu family is not loyal to the emperor, how could they have been favored by the emperor all these years? Selling their daughters for glory. Based on this point, the Hua family could not compare to the Liu family. The emperor will not let a person who knows nothing control hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Liu Jingyun is just a pawn on the surface. Now that Mo Jingli has rebelled, the emperor will not trust the Yi family anymore. It is inevitable that he will support the Liu family. However, the emperor will probably support some new forces to fight against the Liu family in this short period of time. Mo Xiaoyao said carelessly, as if he was not worried about the war in Yonglin. When the reinforcements arrive, we will leave Yonglin. Since the emperor wants to drag it out, let him drag it out. This war will take 3 to 5 months to finish. Murongshun greets the prince and princess consort. Murongshun quickly walked in and paid his respects. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, General, please sit down and talk. Why have you come here at this time? Murongshun nodded awkwardly. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, I heard that the prince will leave Yonglin today. I wonder, what does the prince think about the war in Yongju? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, General, what do you mean? Once the reinforcements arrive, Shattered Snow Pass will be safe. Murongshun sighed helplessly. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said seriously, I always speak frankly. Prince, please don't blame me. With the help of the prince, I believe that the rebellion of Prince Li will be quelled within a month. But why does the prince? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head with a smile. General, You and I both know that the general is not subject to the emperor's orders when he is away. However, there were very few monarchs who could accept these words since ancient times. I'm sure you know what happened to those generals who didn't take orders from the emperor. These days, King Li's army has not moved. I am worried that King Li will send his army to the east. At that time, the people in the southeast will be involved in the war again. Murongshun said seriously. He was a military general and only had a vague understanding of court affairs. That was why he couldn't understand why there was a better way to solve the problem. Why did they have to drag it out and let the people suffer? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and sighed, it's too late. Mo Jingli has already split into two groups heading east. In fact, the reason Mo Jingli didn't make any move these days was because Mo Jingli might not be in the army anymore. Murongshun was shocked and asked, if so, why didn't Prince stop them? General. Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly. Murongshun immediately regretted his words. In the emperor's eyes, King Ding's residence was more terrifying than King Li's rebel army. How could he allow Prince Ding to interfere with King Li's affairs? He was afraid that once the Mohist army moved, the emperor would immediately punish Prince Ding for disobeying the emperor. At that time, hundreds of thousands of Mohist army. Murongshun couldn't help shivering and didn't dare to think about it. The war in the southeast is inevitable. General only needs to guard Shatter Snow Pass and not let Nanzhao's army enter to join King Li. As for King Li's army in Yongju, they will definitely leave Yongju in less than a month. Will the Dachu state be divided into north and south? Murongshun asked silently in his heart. Was dealing with Prince Ding, who had protected the country, more important than quelling the rebel King Li? The honest General Murong naturally didn't understand that in the eyes of Emperor Mo Jingqi, Mo Xiaoyao and Mo Jingli were never on the same level. As long as he could deal with Mo Xiaoyao, even if there was another Mo Jingli, there was nothing to worry about. Jiangnan was occupied by Mo Jingli, and he would take it back sooner or later. However, if he allowed Mo Xiaoyao to occupy Jiangnan, not only would he not take it back, he would also have to guard against whether he would extend his hand to Jiangbei or even try to take over the entire Dachu state. Thus, in reality, other than his initial rage, after Mo Jingqi calmed down, he was almost happy with Mo Jingli's sudden rebellion. Only then would he have a perfect reason to kill his younger brother, who was born of the same mother. General Pinko has arrived. A loud voice rang out from outside the courtyard, causing everyone, including Murongshun, to change their expressions. In front of Prince Ding, not to mention a general who had never been on the battlefield and had just been conferred the title of general, even the old Hua Duke wouldn't be so rude. Was this newly appointed general too brainless, or did he not care about Prince Ding at all? A flurry of footsteps came from afar. It was clear that there were more than one or two people. Yi Li tilted her head and heard the footsteps. There were at least 20 to 30 people. She couldn't help but smile. Did this General Pinko come here just to show off his prowess? Feng Jiao received Yi Li's gaze and curled his lips in disdain. Showing off in front of the prince? Was there something wrong with his head? The prince of the northern tribes who had shown off in front of Prince Ding hadn't recovered his senses yet. Just as they reached the entrance, the group was blocked. A sharp voice rang out. Impudent! General Pinko is here. Why aren't you letting us in? The guard at the entrance was not afraid. He said calmly, General, please remove your weapon. Your bodyguards are not allowed in. I am the commander-in-chief of the army. How can I remove my weapon? What does Prince Ding mean by this? A younger voice sounded with a hint of arrogance and displeasure. The guard said in a low voice, bringing weapons in without the permission of the prince will be treated as an assassination attempt. As the commander-in-chief of the army, General Pinko should know this. Please don't make things difficult for me. Hearing the commotion at the entrance, Mo Xiaoyao rubbed his brows impatiently and said, let them in. There was a moment of silence outside the courtyard. Soon, two men walked in. The one in front was dressed in white, with a white battle robe and a silver scabbard sword hanging from his waist. He looked shiny. Yi Li blinked. She couldn't help but remember that Mo Xiaoyao also seemed to be dressed in white like this a few days ago. She looked at the people walking over and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Mo Xiaoyao was dressed in white, riding a white horse and holding a silver spear. He did look elegant and imposing, but the person in front of her. Yi Li strangely thought of a saying. Those who liked to dress in white were all narcissists who were cold on the inside but passionate on the inside. Just as she was thinking with her head lowered, a slightly cold hand grasped her hand. Yi Li looked up at him. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a smile. There was a hint of doubt in his eyes. Yi Li shook her head to show that it was nothing. She raised her head to look at the person she had ignored. There was nothing special about the person behind her that left a deep impression. If she had to say something, it was that he was limping when he walked. Yi Li thought of a certain person who had been called an idiot by Mo Xiaoyao last year. The two people stood in front of the crowd. They didn't seem to have any intention of saluting. Of course, no one here wanted to salute them. Except for Feng Zhiyao, no one here was lower than them. Feng Zhiyao wasn't a general conferred by the imperial court. Naturally, he didn't have any intention of saluting them. The courtyard was silent for a moment. Guan Ren, who was standing behind Liu Jingyun, seemed to have realized that this couldn't go on. He stood up and said, "Prince, General Liu and I are here to take over Yonglin City under the orders of the Emperor." Chapter 230. Mo Xiaoyao did not make things difficult for him. Nodding slightly, he turned to Feng Zhiyao and said, "Feng-san, order the Black Cloud Cavalry to withdraw from Yonglin." "Yes, Prince." "Wait." Guan Ju hurriedly stopped him. Looking somewhat arrogantly at Mo Xiaoyao, he said, "Prince may not have heard clearly. General Liu and I are under the Emperor's orders to take over Yonglin, including the soldiers of Yonglin City." In one sentence, not only Yonglin City, but also Yonglin City's 20,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. Everyone present sucked in a breath in their hearts. They looked at Guan Ju as if they were looking at a dead person. Mo Xiaoyao did not seem to be angry. Smiling faintly, he said, "General Guan, did the Emperor send you to provoke I?" Guan Ju's breathing stopped. With a stiff expression, he said, "What does Prince mean by this?" The Emperor ordered Prince to lead troops to reinforce Yonglin. He did not order the Prince to be the Commander-in-Chief to quell the rebellion. Now that the Commander-in-Chief is here, shouldn't the Prince hand over the military power of Yonglin? Of course, he remembered the Emperor's orders before he left to not easily provoke Mo Xiaoyao. But, thinking of the humiliation Mo Xiaoyao gave him in the past, a trace of hatred flashed through Guan Ju's eyes. Raising his head, he tried to make himself appear more righteous. Mu Rongshan frowned and said, "General Guan, Prince only ordered the Black Cloud Cavalry to withdraw. You should know that the Black Cloud Cavalry," Guan Ju loudly interrupted, "is the Black Cloud Cavalry not the army of Da Chu State? Or does the Dingwa Prince want to maintain his own military power?" At the end of his words, Guan Ju looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a gaze that could almost be described as malicious. Mo Xiaoyao held onto the armrest and slowly stood up. Guan Ju was startled and couldn't help but take a step back. Mo Xiaoyao took 2 steady steps forward. Looking at him with a calm expression, he asked softly, "General Guan, did you think that after a few years of recuperation, I's temper would be better than before?" Guan Ju's face paled. He stared fearfully at the frail-looking man in white. Did Mo Xiaoyao have a good temper? At least 9.5 out of 10 people who knew him now would think that he had a good temper. However, those who had truly known Mo Xiaoyao for a long time knew that this person had never been someone with a good temper. He could beat Mo Jingli up just because he tried to trip him up. He could also join forces with Feng Zhiyao to beat Mo Jingli up and hang him up on a tree. He could also whip Guan Jie in front of an army of several thousand without saying a word because of his poor command. This kind of temperament could not be considered good. What do you want to do?" Guan Jie asked in fear. "If what you said just now wasn't the Emperor's idea. General Guan, do you know what punishment you will receive?" Mo Xiaoyao asked calmly. Guan Jie looked at Mo Xiaoyao in fear, but he didn't dare to say that it was Mo Jingqi's idea. Even if Mo Jingqi was crazy, he wouldn't ask Mo Xiaoyao for the military power of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Not to mention whether Mo Xiaoyao would give it to him, Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it. Instead, he would only cause trouble for himself. He could only look pleadingly at Liu Jingyun, who had been ignored. Although Liu Jingyun was unhappy with Prince Ding's disregard, only after seeing Prince Ding did she realize that she didn't have the aura to compete with Prince Ding. Her previous arrogance was only left with unwillingness and fear. Prince. Under Mo Xiuyao's gaze, Guan Jie's expression began to tremble. Finally, as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, he knelt down weakly on the ground. Mo Xiuyao walked past him with steady steps. Feng-san, get ready to leave. Yes, Prince. Yi Li smiled and nodded to Murong-shun, then followed him. Murong-shun helplessly looked at the two new generals, sighed and turned to leave. Fortunately, this general had no subordinate relationship with him. In this case, he would take care of his own troops and guard his own pass. Liu Jingyun, who had been left behind, stared blankly at the figures disappearing outside the door. Did anyone remember that he was the new general? The Black Cloud Cavalry was indeed obedient. In less than 15 minutes after Mo Xiuyao's order, the real Black Cloud Cavalry had all withdrawn from Yonglin City. The strange movements of the Black Cloud Cavalry made the opposing rebel army nervous. When they confirmed that the Black Cloud Cavalry had no intention of attacking them, they sighed in relief. But they did not dare to let down their guard. Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao also returned to their rooms to pack and prepare to leave the city to meet with the Black Cloud Cavalry. Wang Fei, Officer Yun requests an audience, an reported from outside the door. Yi Li raised an eyebrow, curious about Yun Ting's intentions. Let him in. A moment later, Yun Ting walked in with a nervous expression. Yi Li had a good impression of this young general and smiled faintly. Yun Ting looked at Yi Li's light clothing and asked, "Is Wang Fei and the prince leaving soon?" Yi Li nodded and said, "The prince is handing over to General Liu and will leave soon." Are Officer Yun and Officer Xia also returning to Shattered Snow Pass? Yun Ting was slightly embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, he finally gritted his teeth and knelt on one knee, saying, "This general wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry. Wang Fei, please take me in." Yi Li looked in shock at Yun Ting's determined expression. She frowned and said, "If Officer Yun wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry, you should ask the prince." "Why are you asking me?" Yun Ting stilled and didn't know what to do. Previously, he had only thought that Wang Fei was here so he could ask Wang Fei, but he had forgotten that Prince Ding was also here. This kind of matter would most likely require Prince Ding's agreement. Seeing Yun Ting's dazed state, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Why would Officer Yun want to join the Black Cloud Cavalry?" The Black Cloud Cavalry was chosen from the elites of the Mohist army. It wasn't something that could be joined just because one wanted to. Yun Ting gritted his teeth and said, "Only the Black Cloud Cavalry is the best army in the Dhu state. Yun Ting wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry and follow the prince and Wang Fei on the battlefield." Seeing Yun Ting's serious appearance, Yi Li burst into laughter. "Officer Yun, you are already the most outstanding officer under General Mu Rong's command. This time, you have made great contributions defending Yonglin. In a few years, you will become the youngest general in the Dhu state. If you join the Black Cloud Cavalry." Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile. Yun Ting hurriedly said, "As long as I can join the Black Cloud Cavalry, Yun Ting is willing to be a normal soldier." Yi Li looked at him, "Officer Yun, do you know why the Black Cloud Cavalry only has several tens of thousands of people?" Yun Ting said matter-of-factly, "The Black Cloud Cavalry is the elite of the elite. Since they are the elite, they are naturally the minority." Yi Li nodded and said, "That's right, the Black Cloud Cavalry is the elite of the elite. But, because they are the elite, they are the minority. In a true battle, the Black Cloud Cavalry will never be the most important troops." Yun Ting did not understand. They had only heard stories since they were young about how the Black Cloud Cavalry had made great contributions and how they had turned the tides. Why was Wang Fei's explanation different? Yi Li smiled slightly and said, "What is the reason for the two armies to fight? To attack cities and seize land. That's right, the Black Cloud Cavalry can raid from 1,000 li, they can ambush and kill leaders. They can complete many missions that normal soldiers cannot. But they cannot attack a city alone, nor can they defend a city alone. Therefore, they are only there to support the army. Yi Li said softly. Chapter 231. Support. A very important support. It is the best trump card for them. They can appear in the most unlikely places. But usually, they can only hide and remain unknown. Officer Yun, have you ever heard of any famous generals from the Black Cloud Cavalry? Yun Ting shook his head. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud Cavalry was powerful, but the generals of the Black Cloud Cavalry were always unknown. The Black Cloud Cavalry were not many, but there were still tens of thousands of them. Even though Prince Ding personally controlled them, it was impossible for Prince Ding to personally arrange everything. Yet, from the day the Black Cloud Cavalry was built, it seemed to only have this name. The Black Cloud Cavalry represented everyone's name. In the history of the Da Chu state, there had never been a Black Cloud Cavalry general's real name. Yi Li sighed softly and said, I see that Officer Yun has a straightforward personality and is a person with great ambitions. And to have such achievements in his early 20s, his future is limitless. If he really becomes a normal member of the Black Cloud Cavalry, I'm afraid it will ruin Officer Yun's ambitions. The Black Cloud Cavalry was the true sword of the Ding Kingdom. The sword did not need to think too much. Where Prince Ding pointed was their will. In reality, it was similar to the special forces in her previous life. With Yun Ting's personality, even if he really entered, if he did not experience some hardships, he would regret it in the future. As expected, Yun Ting's face turned red. He said anxiously, Wang Fei, I. Yi Li raised her hand to stop him. She laughed softly and said, Don't worry. I'm not saying that you are not good. I just hope that you can think clearly. Is your ambition to be a general who can ride a horse and laugh on the battlefield, or to be a hidden arrow that hides in the shadows and attacks at the right moment? Yun Ting was silent. He had never considered what the Wang Fei said. No wonder when he said he wanted to come and beg the Wang Fei, Xie Shu did not support or encourage him as usual. Had he already seen that he was not suited for the Black Cloud Cavalry? But Yun Ting looked dazedly at the kind and elegant woman in front of him. Worshipping the strong, and Prince Ding and Princess Ding were undoubtedly strong. He knew that he truly wanted to follow them. What's going on? Li Li, Mo Xiaoyao slowly walked in and asked after seeing Yun Ting's conflicted expression. Yi Li smiled faintly and told him what had just happened. Mo Xiaoyao turned around and looked at Yun Ting for a while. Yun Ting felt a little uneasy under his stare, but he still tried his best to remain calm. What did General Murong say? Mo Xiaoyao asked. He had to inform General Murong about the transfer. Yun Ting's heart jumped and he quickly said, General Murong said that as long as the prince and princess agree, it will be fine. Mo Xiaoyao muttered to himself for a moment, and then said, You are not suitable to join the Black Cloud Cavalry. Yun Ting immediately felt a wave of disappointment, as well as mixed feelings. Mo Xiaoyao continued, However, if you are willing, you can follow Li Li for now. Yun Ting and Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao at the same time. Yi Li raised her eyebrows in confusion. Follow her for what? If she took in a military officer as a bodyguard, Yun Ting might not be her match. Mo Xiaoyao said, You don't have any useful people by your side. Those four are still far from being able to mobilize troops. I will have Qin Feng follow you, and Yun Ting as well. Although he is still a bit impetuous, General Murong seems to think that he is a talent that can be nurtured. After a bit of training, if he is useful, we will transfer him into the Mohist army. Yi Li did not care, but Yun Ting could not hide the shock in his heart. Listening to Prince Ding's words, he was actually training a trusted aide for Princess. In the future, not only would Princess Ding be able to mobilize the Black Cloud Cavalry, she would also be able to control the hundreds of thousands of Mohist army. Many thanks to Prince, this general is willing to follow Princess. Yun Ting immediately responded. Mo Xiaoyao nodded, Since it is like this, you can go and say goodbye to General Murong. Follow the army and depart in an hour. Yes. Beside the Cloudwater River, Compared to Yonglin City where the two armies were still facing each other, Yi Li's group was clearly too relaxed. Once they left Yonglin City, Feng Jiao took the Black Cloud cavalry and ran off somewhere. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao took the accompanying guards and prepared to return to Jing with Shenyang, who had just arrived. The pitiful Shenyang did not even have the strength to truss a chicken, but he had rushed from the Chu capital to Yongju in less than 10 days. But before he could even catch his breath, he was told that they were about to return to Jing. Shenyang pointed at Mo Xiaoyao, his finger trembling as he panted. He did not forget to say angrily, "What did I owe you Mo people in my last life?" Ever since he had given the phoenix grass to a certain prince who did not listen to medical advice, Shenyang's temper had become more and more irritable. Shenzyansheng, the group set up camp beside the Cloudwater River. Mo Xiaoyao took Yun Ting and the others to go hunting. Yi Li finally had the time to find Shenyang to talk. Shenyang was sitting by the river, holding a medical book that was thick enough to kill someone. He frowned as he read it carefully. Hearing Yi Li's figure, he turned around and wanted to stand up to greet her. Yi Li quickly waved her hand and said, "There are no outsiders here, Shenzyansheng does not have to be like this." Shenyang did not stand on ceremony and sat back down. He placed the medical book aside and smiled. "Princess Consort made the Black Cloud Cavalry admire you for your prompt decision to guard Yonglin. I am also full of admiration. Princess Consort is indeed a heroine." Yi Li shook her head and smiled helplessly. "Shenzyansheng does not have to be so courteous." "What heroine? I was only forced by the situation." "Does Shenzyansheng know why Yi Li did this?" Shenyang looked at Yi Li for a long time and finally sighed, "Bringing back that harmful phoenix grass, I really do not know if it was right or wrong." Yi Li shook her head and said softly, "It was Prince's idea to consume the phoenix grass. Shenzyansheng has already informed the Prince of the consequences. No matter what, it was Prince's choice. Furthermore, since it has already been done, there is no point in pursuing who was responsible. Yi Li only wants to know how Prince's body is now. Is there any way to solve it?" Shenyang looked at Yi Li and his eyes revealed a trace of admiration. He said seriously, "In this half a year, I have carefully studied the phoenix grass and also flipped through many ancient medical books. The phoenix grass is not unique to the Eastern Sea. The phoenix grass is called phoenix tail and it grew in the Central Plains in ancient times. According to the ancient books, the phoenix grass is extremely strong and poisonous. However, it is also the nemesis of most poisons in the world. It even has the effect of cleansing the marrow, so it is called a miracle medicine. However, for some reason, the phoenix grass disappeared from the Central Plains, so there is almost no record of it in the medical books. The cold poison in Prince's body is the coldest poison in the world. Although the phoenix tail can counter it, it is not enough to cure the poison. As a result, the fire and cold poisons exist in Prince's body at the same time and it can only be said to have reached a temporary balance. However, this balance is very dangerous and it can even collapse at any time. At that time, even if there is the raging fire lotus, it will be useless." Yi Li nodded. "Shenzyansheng once said that the two poisons will change in Prince's body." Shenyang said, "Really? If the cold poison and the phoenix tail can cancel each other out, there are other ways to think of. However, the two poisons in Prince's body are acting independently. The cold gets colder and the fire gets hotter. If a normal person were to eat the raging fire lotus seed by mistake, their internal organs would be burned to ashes in an instant. If the raging fire lotus seed were to combine with the phoenix tail, I'm afraid, before the cold poison could be cured, Prince would die of the fire poison first." Chapter 232. Yi Li frowned. "Mr. Shen, is the Bai Luo grass useful to the prince?" Shenyang was startled and began to ponder. "After a long time," he said, "Bai Luo grass and phoenix grass are both long-lost medicines. Legend has it that it can bring the dead back to life and prolong one's life to 100 years old. But whether or not it can cure the poison in the prince's body, I'm not sure. After all, the Bai Luo grass has been extinct for a longer time than the phoenix grass. I've only heard about it from my ancestors." Yi Li nodded and said, "I understand, but it's always good to have more hope. Shenyang asked curiously, could it be that the princess consort knows where the Bailuo grass is? Yi Li nodded slightly, I'll find it as soon as possible. This matter. Mr. Shin, please don't mention it to the prince first. If she wanted to take the Bailuo grass from the sickly scholar, she definitely couldn't use the people of the mansion. With the hatred that sickly scholar had for Mo Xiaoyao, he would rather not destroy the Bailuo grass than let the people of the Prince Ding mansion get it. How long can the prince's body last? Shenyang lowered his eyebrows and said in a low voice, as long as there are no accidents, there shouldn't be any problems within a year and a half. Furthermore, the effect of the phoenix grass is not continuous. The prince's body is indeed much better than before. But when the moon is full, the cold and fire will come together and it will be so painful that he will wish he was dead. During summer and autumn, the fire poison will burn the body, and during spring and winter, the cold poison will attack the heart. Whether it is the cold poison or the fire poison, it will be 10 times more painful than when the cold poison acts up. Yi Li remembered the scene she saw when she stepped into the room that day. She couldn't imagine how painful it would be for someone like Mo Xiaoyao to be in such a sorry state. Painkillers. Shenyang shook his head sadly. Painkillers are completely ineffective. Not only that, I'm afraid that in the future, any painkillers or even knockout drugs will be ineffective on the prince. Yi Li felt a chill in her heart. This meant that even if Mo Xiaoyao was injured in the future, he would not be able to use painkillers or anesthetics. Mr. Li. Yi Li turned around and saw the white-robed man walking towards her with a smile. She lowered her eyes to hide the worry in her eyes as she walked up to him. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Shenyang, who had already picked up the medical book and was preparing to continue reading. He lowered his head and smiled at Yi Li. What is Mr. Li talking about with Mr. Shen? Yi Li smiled and said, I'm asking Mr. Shen about some herbal medicine. Didn't you see several strange herbs in Nanjiao this time? Ask Mr. Shen what they are used for. Mo Xiaoyao smiled slightly. Li Li has a wide range of interests. She's even interested in medicine. Yi Li shook her head. I don't have much talent in medicine, but I do have some knowledge of herbal medicine. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li towards the camp. As he walked, he smiled and said, I know. I heard that you have your people memorize herbal medicine books and follow the doctors to identify herbs. Yi Li smiled and said, it's just some common herbs. You can't always carry them around with you, right? Mr. Li is right. Maybe we can have the Black Cloud Cavalry follow them and learn. Mo Xiaoyao thought. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, the Black Cloud Cavalry is not the same as them. They only need a certain number of doctors to follow them, or they themselves are doctors. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at Yi Li and said, does Mr. Li have some special idea that you don't want to tell me? Yi Li shook her head. No, it's just a prototype. When I finish it, maybe I can give you a surprise. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, then I will wait for Mr. Li's surprise. Let's go eat. Then we will go watch a play. The play that Mo Xiaoyao spoke of was a good play. There were more than 30,000 soldiers hidden in Yongju and Yongju. Yi Li finally knew why Feng Zhiyao had taken the 20,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. In one night, many mountain strongholds in Yongju and Yongju were destroyed. Countless people who had disguised themselves as bandits but were clearly well trained were killed by the Black Cloud Cavalry. The rest fled in panic towards the border between Yongju and Shilling. Mo Xiaoyao led Yi Li and the others to wait at the border. When the group of happy remnant soldiers saw the dense armored cavalry, their eyes couldn't help but reveal looks of despair. The Yongju officials all knelt on the ground with ashen faces, trembling as they looked at the beautiful couple sitting side by side in front of them. The man was gentle and elegant, the woman elegant and graceful. However, in their eyes, they were even more terrifying than man-eating demons. 2 days ago, they were invited to Prince Ding's side by a token. Prince Ding didn't say anything, only bringing them along. Wherever Prince Ding went, they would follow. They watched helplessly as the mountain strongholds were destroyed by the Black Cloud Cavalry one after another. The 20,000 people in front of the Black Cloud Cavalry were like ants, not worth a mention. These remnant soldiers in front of them were already the last fish that escaped the net. However, they were still stopped by Prince Ding on this small hill less than 5 li from the border. Mo Xiaoyao calmly looked at the Yongju governor who was kneeling closest to him, calmly asking, "Sir, do you know why the Yongju governor died?" The Yongju governor's face paled, saying with a trembling voice, "Rebellion, rebellion." The Yongju governor was still killed by the Ding king's shadow guard even under the protection of King Li's powerful army. This matter had already spread throughout the world before today. It also made many officials tense up in their minds. Mo Xiaoyao said with a faint smile, "Rebellion? Correct, this is indeed a capital offense. Then, does Sir know what kind of offense it is to betray the country? This Prince, this small official doesn't dare. This small official is loyal and devoted to the Dhu state." "Loyal and devoted," Mo Xiaoyao said with a cold laugh, "loyal and devoted. Where did these 10,000 people in your Yongju come from? Why did General Wu Chengliang and the 20,000 soldiers in Yongju die? This small official truly does not know." The Yongju governor cried out. "This small official is innocent. I beg Prince to judge clearly," Mo Xiaoyao said calmly. "I don't care if you are innocent or not. You can tell the emperor yourself. I invited you here today to let you see the Black Cloud cavalry pay tribute to the Yongju governor and General Wu's spirit. Even though the civil officials and military generals do not have subordinates, they can still be considered colleagues. Everyone here should also send them on their way." Feng Zhiao, who was standing behind Mo Xiaoyao, waved his hand. "Kill." 10,000 arrows were released. The remnant Western Tomb soldiers who were trapped in the center immediately fell to the ground and died. The officials kneeling on the ground smelled the pungent smell of blood in the air. One by one, they fought to be the first to vomit. Mo Xiaoyao acted as if he did not see it. He pulled Yi Li up and turned his head to order, "Send the officials back to their respective manors. Also, throw these Western Tomb people out of the border. Do not pollute my Dhu state's land." "As you command." Mo Xiaoyao nodded his head in satisfaction. He turned his head and smiled at Yi Li. "Yi Li, we should return to the capital." Yi Li nodded her head slightly and followed Mo Xiaoyao. What about not killing captives? There seemed to be no need to say. Even though he had received the emperor's urgent order to return to the capital, Mo Xiaoyao clearly did not take it to heart. Instead, he had Feng Zhiao leave with the Black Cloud cavalry. He himself took Yi Li and the others and leisurely headed north. They spent close to 10 days to reach Guangling City. Because she did not have a purpose in coming to Guangling City for the second time, Yi Li appeared much more relaxed. Only when Mo Xiaoyao brought her to stand in front of the Wind and Moon Pavilion did she look back at the man beside her with some surprise. Chapter 233. Mo Xiaoyao smiled but didn't say a word. The Wind and Moon Inn wasn't open for business during the day. However, there was still someone at the door to welcome them. Looking at the young man standing at the door with a serious expression, Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "The Tianyi Pavilion is indeed well informed. It seems that Han Mingyu hasn't wasted her time all these years." The young man's smile was a bit stiff. "Thank you for your praise, Prince. My superior ordered me to welcome the Prince and Princess consort here. Please come in." After entering the Wind and Moon Inn, the young man led them directly to the backyard. It was still the same pavilion where Yi Li saw Han Mingxi last time. Han Mingxi and Han Mingyu sat facing each other. Seeing Yi Li, Han Mingxi's eyes flashed with a trace of absent-mindedness. When he came back to his senses, he raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. Han Mingyu put down his teacup and stood up to welcome them. His smile was gentle and elegant. "Xiaoyao, long time no see. You're really good." Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Mo Xiaoyao directly waved his palm. The fierce wind from his palm attacked the elegant man with earth-shattering force. Han Mingyue's voice suddenly stopped. He awkwardly flipped over and dodged Mo Xiaoyao's palm. However, the fierce wind from the palm still made him unable to breathe. He coughed a few times before smiling bitterly. "Xiaoyao, long time no see. Is this how you treat me?" Mo Xiaoyao snorted softly. He stepped forward and continuously attacked. Every palm strike was real, and there was absolutely no intention of joking about it. Han Mingyu could only withdraw his smile and carefully deal with it. The two of them fought back and forth in the garden. While the fight was in full swing, Han Mingxi also stood up and walked to Yi Li's side. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Junwei, long time no see. Are you here to see me? If you want to look at me, just do it yourself. Why did you bring him along?" Yi Li pointed at the man in white in the garden, indicating that he wanted to come. Han Mingxi glanced sideways, and the smile on his face was a little forced. "Jun Wei," Yi Li said calmly, "don't worry, Prince won't kill him. If he really wanted Han Mingyu's life, Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have to do it himself. No matter how powerful the Qianni Pavilion was, could they stop the Black Cloud Cavalry or the Shadow Guard of the Ding King's mansion?" Han Mingxi smiled bitterly. "But Prince Ding has no intention of showing mercy. Mo Xiaoyao was only in his 20s, but in Feng Jiao's eyes, there wasn't a single expert who could be compared to him. One could only imagine the distance between him and Han Mingyu. While the two of them were talking, Han Mingyu had already been slapped to the ground. He fell not far from the two of them and spat out a mouthful of blood. Yi Li could tell with a glance that two of his ribs were broken. Han Mingxi hurriedly went forward to help him up, but Han Mingyu waved his hand to stop him. He looked up at Mo Xiaoyao, who was strolling over, and asked, "Xiaoyao, have you calmed down?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly. "Do you know why I didn't kill you this time?" Han Mingyu raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "Since Li promised Han Mingxi to let you go, I will let you go this time. However, you better remember that I have a limit to my patience. If you make a move against Li again, you might as well try and see how far I can go." Han Mingyu clutched his chest and coughed violently. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao helplessly and said, "Xiaoyao, in your eyes, is Yi Li more important than our friendship since childhood?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and his lips curled into a mocking smile. "In your eyes, when have you ever thought that our friendship since childhood was important?" Han Mingyu was speechless. That's right, he had betrayed their friendship first. "However, in my eyes, you will always be my best friend," Han Mingyu said in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao snorted and said calmly, "Since you called me your friend, I promise you, the next time you offend I won't kill you." Han Mingyu was stunned, but her expression changed when she saw Han Mingxi and Yi Li's curiosity and confusion. "Xiaoyao, don't. This has nothing to do with her. This was all my idea." Hearing his words, Han Mingxi's face immediately darkened. She snorted unhappily and swallowed back the words she was about to say. In any case, Prince Ding didn't plan on killing him. Just torment him until he didn't have the energy to run around. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't interested in whose idea it was. He turned to Han Mingxi and said, "If you want him to live well, then keep a close eye on him." Han Mingxi's handsome face was ugly as he coldly said, "Prince doesn't need to worry." Mo Xiaoyao held Yi Li's hand and prepared to leave. Han Mingyu on the ground opened her mouth and said, "Xiaoyao, you specially took a detour to Guangling. It can't be that you want to beat me up, right?" Mo Xiaoyao stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her, saying, "By the way, I'll tell you something. If you don't know how to play politics, then earn your money. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and cry about it later." Seeing the two leave without looking back, Han Mingyu couldn't help but frown as she thought about Mo Xiaoyao's words. Don't know how to play politics. He really didn't have any interest in politics and had never gotten involved before. Only. Her expression changed. Han Mingyu turned to Han Mingxi and said, "Quick. Send someone to investigate what happened in Xiling." Han Mingxi only felt the veins on his forehead throbbing. "Who said that young master you was smarter than others? He was already dumber than a donkey, okay? Others wouldn't turn back unless they hit a wall, but he still wouldn't turn back even if his head was broken and bleeding." Investigate my ass. This young master is a citizen of Da State. Why should I care about the life and death of Xiling? Someone, bring me the best tendon softening powder. If anyone dares to give him the antidote, this young master will skin them. I've seen what it means to be a femme fatale. I don't believe that other than that slut, there aren't any other women in this world. This prince will go and disfigure her tomorrow. When no one wants her anymore, this prince will buy her back to be your servant girl. After he finished speaking, Han Mingxi couldn't be bothered to care about his older brother who was still stuck on the ground and couldn't move. He flicked his sleeves and left in a huff. Han Mingxi, stop right there, Han Mingyu said sternly. Han Mingxi's rushing body paused. He turned around and gnashed his teeth as he waited for his older brother who was 70% similar to him. In his heart, he wanted nothing more than to pull out that femme fatale's tendons and skin him alive. He had worshipped his older brother since he was young, but he didn't dare to compliment his older brother's taste in women. Seeing Han Mingxi's cold and angry glare, Han Mingyue's eyes flashed with a trace of guilt. Her voice softened as she said, Mingxi, don't make a fuss. Big brother promises that he won't do anything else. Mo Xiaoyao broke 2 of my ribs. Come and help me up. Han Mingxi was stunned. Seeing Han Mingyue's deathly pale face, his heart softened and he went forward to help his older brother up. You. Han Mingyu. After a moment, Han Mingxi's voice was filled with anger and resentment. Unfortunately, his entire body was frozen and he couldn't move. His handsome face was twisted as he stared at the man in front of him who was clutching his chest with a deathly pale face. Han Mingyue's eyes were filled with guilt as she looked at her younger brother. I'm sorry, Mingxi. Seeing that he was about to turn around and leave, Han Mingxi cried out in despair, Han Mingyu, you idiot, I've been poisoned. You really want Yi Li to kill me? Han Mingyu turned to look at him with a smile and shook her head. You really are a foolish child. Mingxi, since you boast that you're better at judging people than I am, how can you not see that Yi Li won't kill you? She didn't poison you either. Han Mingxi said coldly, so these past few days, you've been trying to determine if there's any poison in my body. Now that you've confirmed it, you want to leave. Chapter 234. Don't worry, I won't make a move on your friend again. Mo Xiaoyao. I can't afford to offend him. Han Mingyu looked at her brother gently. After thinking for a while, she warned, Mingxi, stay away from Yi Li. She's not someone you can afford to offend. Han Mingxi's face stiffened. He said disdainfully, are you qualified to say that? Han Mingyu shook her head helplessly. Do you think you're smarter than me? Mingxi, I can fight with anyone in the world, but I've never thought of fighting with Xiaoyao. Do you know? Han Mingxi sneered. Yes, you can choose your opponent, but unfortunately, you don't know how to choose a woman. Besides using you, has that woman ever looked you in the eye? Even if Junwei doesn't like me, she would at least save me. She would feel guilty for me and show mercy to you because of me. What have you gained all these years? The smile on Han Mingyue's face gradually turned bitter and helpless. In the end, she had no choice but to admit that her brother was right. She could only turn and leave silently. After a long time, the young man who led the way appeared in the garden. Second young master, the young master has left. Han Mingxi, who had just had his acupoints unsealed, was extremely irritated. So what if he's gone? When has he ever treated us as equals? The young man lowered his head and said, the young master said he won't return. The Wind and Moon Pavilion and all the banknotes in the bank have been left to the second young master. The Tianyi Pavilion will no longer listen to the second young master's orders. He's already made his plans. If it wasn't for Prince Ding's visit today, was he intending to leave without a sound? Han Mingyu, you're ruthless. Han Mingxi clenched his teeth. The young man lowered his head and didn't say anything. Han Mingxi snorted coldly. Slut, just you wait. In the best inn in Guangling, Yi Li and her group had booked the best courtyard in the inn for the time being. Xiaoyao, today you. Looking at the man beside her who had his head lowered as he read, Yi Li frowned slightly and asked with some hesitation. Mo Xiaoyao put down his book and smiled. Li Li wants to ask why I went to look for Han Mingyu. Yi Li nodded. If it was just to beat him up to vent her anger, it would be too troublesome. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, if I'm not wrong, Han Mingyu will be heading to West Hill very soon. To the West Hill? Mo Xiaoyao nodded. That's right. Rather than letting him leave quietly, I might as well send him on his way. Although the Han family wasn't ranked at the top in Chu state, they were at least in the top 10. If he brought them all to West Hill, it wouldn't be a good thing. Yi Li's eyes flashed. You're saying that Han Mingyu wants to? She didn't say the word treason, but Mo Xiaoyao nodded indifferently. I understand Han Mingyu. The country and the world are nothing in his eyes. To him, there's no difference if you become a citizen of Chu state to a citizen of West Hill or a citizen of the northern tribes. If that's the case, why not eliminate him completely? Yi Li didn't understand. Even if Mo Xiaoyao really valued his friendship with Han Mingyu, he definitely wouldn't see him as more important than the Chu state. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. The Tianyi Pavilion is spread throughout the 4 countries. Once Han Mingyu is killed, there'll be a lot of trouble. If he wants to leave, then let him leave. I've said before that he's not suited for politics. Since he's openly committed treason, then there's no need for us to leave the Chu state. In that case, there is no need for the Tianyi Pavilion to exist within the borders of Great Chu. The most important reason why he came to Guangling was to wipe out the Tianyi Pavilion. The southern part of Chu state, especially Guangling City, was the Tianyi Pavilion's headquarters. How could it be so easy for Han Mingyu to withdraw his people and carriages from under his nose? Han Mingshi? Yi Li asked with a frown. Mo Xiaoyao said, if we use another method, Han Mingshi might leave with Han Mingyu. But today, he won't be able to leave. If Han Mingshi is really smart, he'll come to me. Yi Li looked at him. You're deliberately provoking Han Mingyu so that he'll act in advance and drive a wedge between the 2 brothers? Mo Xiaoyao didn't deny it. He rubbed between his eyebrows tiredly and said, it's a good thing that Han Mingshi stays. If they both leave, the entire Han family can only be executed. Han Mingyu and his brother weren't the only members of the Han family. No matter which big family, main family, branch family, or main family, they couldn't take everyone away. Once all of them were connected, the scope of the implications was shocking to the eye. Han Mingyu will side with the West Hill Imperial Court? He's not an ordinary person. The Han family is a big family, and the Tianyi Pavilion is even more involved. As long as he goes to West Hill, whether it's the Emperor of Shilling or the Genom of Gojosian, they'll definitely try to rope him in. Whether he'll be used by them or not, in the eyes of the Imperial family, he's already a traitor. The Imperial family couldn't tolerate sand in their eyes. As long as Han Mingyu went to West Hill, it would be a betrayal. Even if he didn't betray the country, the Imperial family would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Yi Li sighed speechlessly. She still couldn't understand Han Mingyu. Han Mingyu, is he doing this for a woman? Mo Xiaoyao was stunned. He raised his head and looked at Yi Li for a long time. Finally, he nodded and said, yes, it's indeed for a woman. Yi Li frowned. She felt that this woman's identity was special. She hesitated whether or not she should continue this topic. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her quietly. His smile was calm and warm. Yi Li, you can ask anything you want to know. This woman is someone you know? Mo Xiaoyao nodded. Just as he was about to speak, San reported from outside, Princess Consort. Young Master Han requests an audience. Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow slightly. He looked apologetically at Yi Li and said, let him in. When Han Mingshi came in, he looked like a completely different person from his usual playful and flamboyant appearance. His originally handsome and slightly evil smile had disappeared. Right now, he looked more tired and gloomy, and seemed to have some grievance and disappointment from being abandoned. Yi Li could only sigh silently inside. Mo Xiaoyao had made the decision he thought was most appropriate. Han Mingyu had chosen the person he thought was most important. As for Han Mingshi, from the beginning to the end, he was the most innocent one. Princess Consort. Han Mingshi's voice was slightly stiff. Mo Xiaoyao nodded slightly and said calmly, young Master Han, please sit. Han Mingshi sat down without a word. His gaze passed lightly over Yi Li's body and paused for a moment before returning to Mo Xiaoyao. Prince already knew of my big brother's plans. Staring at Mo Xiaoyao, Han Mingxi asked rudely. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, Han Mingyu understands me, and I understand him. So, I can roughly guess what kind of decision he will make for someone or something. But he probably did not expect me to come so quickly. Han Mingxi was silent. Yes, if Mo Xiaoyao had not suddenly come to Guangling, perhaps Han Mingyu would have suddenly disappeared after arranging everything at night or during the day. But now, Han Mingyu, whose plans had been disrupted, could only sneak attack Han Mingxi and then leave in a hurry. But he left behind a huge mess for his little brother who had been spoiled since childhood. Then, young Master Han, what plans do you have in coming to see I? Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Chapter 235. Han Mingxi stared at him and asked, if I don't have any plans, what does Prince plan to do? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said, the Tianyi Pavilion's spies in Guangling and in Daechu State will all be eradicated in 3 days. As for the Han family, I do not have the authority to punish them. However, if the decree from the capital really comes, Sir Han should know what the contents will be. 9. Familial extermination. Han Mingxi murmured bitterly. Big brother, for that woman, do you think you don't care about me or the Han family at all? The hall was silent for a moment. Han Mingxi finally raised his head and said to Mo Xiaoyao, the Han family has already expelled Han Mingyu from the family. From now on, Han Mingyu is no longer a member of the Han family in Guangling. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly. Who said that Han Mingxi was useless? Based on his decisiveness, Han Mingxi was definitely more suitable than Han Mingyu to be in charge of the Han family. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. Since that is the case, I will also write to the emperor to declare the Han family's innocence. Han Mingyu lowered her eyes and said faintly, many thanks to Prince. Although he did not have a good impression of Mo Xiaoyao, Han Mingxi could not help but thank him. Even if the Han family and Han Mingyu broke off their relationship, once Han Mingyu really worked for Shilling in the future, the Han family would still not be able to escape the fate of being punished. Even if they were lucky enough to escape, the expenses needed to clear up the relationship would be enough to destroy the Han family. With Prince Ding's words, even the emperor would not question the Han family's innocence. The Ding kingdom and the 3 surrounding countries could be said to have a deep hatred. Even if the emperor himself colluded with the enemy, Prince Ding would not collude with the enemy. I have one more thing to ask of Prince and Princess Consort. Sir, please speak, Mo Xiaoyao said. A trace of determination flashed through Han Mingxi's eyes. He looked at Yi Li and said, as the head of the Han family, Han Mingxi is willing to follow Prince and Princess Consort. Following as the head of the Han family meant that the entire Han family would support the Ding kingdom. What are the conditions? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Han Mingxi had made such a huge bet, of course, not without conditions. Han Mingxi said in a deep voice, I only ask, if Big Brother lands in the hands of Wang Yi in the future, I ask Wang Yi to be magnanimous and spare his life. Han Mingxi was very clear that with Han Mingyue's future identity and position, it was impossible for her to not go against the Ding King's residence. At the same time, he was also clear that his eldest brother was far from being Prince Ding's opponent. Not only because his martial arts and wisdom were slightly inferior to Prince Ding's, but also because he did not have Princess Ding's assistance. That slut would only cause trouble for his eldest brother. Mo Xiaoyao chuckled in a low voice. Young Master Han is indeed loyal. Since young Master Han has so much confidence in this king, as you wish. If Sir Han has any matters in the future, just follow Princess Li's wishes and do it. Han Mingxi looked at Mo Xiaoyao with surprise and then looked at Yi Li who was sitting beside him. He bowed his head and said, this subordinate obeys. I have disturbed Prince and Princess Consort. Farewell. Seeing Han Mingxi stand up and leave, Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and suddenly said, Han Mingyu dared to let go so easily because he knows I's way of doing things. He knows that I will not harm the foundation of the Han family. Han Mingxi's feet paused for a moment and then he walked out of the hall without looking back. Why did you tell him this? And let him listen to me? Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, Han Mingyu is loyal, Han Mingxi is also loyal. But Han Mingyu is more loyal, while Han Mingxi is more loyal to his brothers. My tone will let him know that I is scheming against his Han family's power one day, so I might as well tell him directly now. He is a smart person and knows what to choose. As for Princess Li, since she is already involved in this dispute, no one can withdraw. Princess Li, you need to have enough strength to protect yourself. Even if you don't have me, no one will dare to touch your strength. Also, Han Mingxi is arrogant and a bit of a schemer. If he refuses to obey me, even if he is loyal to me, he will have to obey me in public but oppose me in private. I don't think he will harm you. But Princess Li. As if thinking of something, Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li with a serious expression. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao's voice was gentle and elegant. You can't be too good to him. Otherwise. Yi Li felt a bit uncomfortable under his strange gaze and asked. Otherwise, I will kill him, Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, but Yi Li could hear the seriousness in his words. At least not while I am alive. Yi Li's heart trembled. She reached out to hold his hand and said seriously, you will be fine. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and stopped talking about this topic. All right, Princess Li. Let's continue talking about what we were talking about. Yi Li's memory was not bad. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, what kind of woman can make someone like Han Mingyu so obsessed? Not to mention how many women Han Mingyu had seen. As the owner of the Wind and Moon Inn, which of the women in the Wind and Moon Inn wasn't multi-talented and beautiful? What kind of peerless beauty could make a man like Han Mingyu so infatuated? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said in a deep voice, Su Zuidi. Su Zuidi. Su Zuidi. Yi Li was a bit shocked. Su Zuidi is not dead. Mo Xiaoyao nodded faintly, as if he did not care that his ex-fiancée was not dead. He also did not care that his former good friend Han Mingyu was obsessed with his ex-fiancée. In just a moment, Yi Li's mind was filled with countless thoughts. After a while, she asked, the person who wanted Han Mingyu to kidnap me last year was Su Zuidi. She is now in West Hill, and she has something to do with the Emperor of Shilling's wife. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li apologetically and nodded. Yi Li could not help but rub her eyebrows as she analyzed the information she knew in her mind. Su Zuidi died 3 months after Mo Xiaoyao was seriously injured. But now she was in West Hill, and she was very likely to be the wife of the Emperor of Shilling. Han Mingyu and Mo Xiaoyao were good friends, but he was also in love with Su Zuidi. After Su Zuidi died, Han Mingyu and Mo Xiaoyao broke off, but it was obvious that Han Mingyu had betrayed Mo Xiaoyao. In other words, Han Mingyu and Su Zuidi had done something to betray Mo Xiaoyao. But there shouldn't be any secret relationship between the two. Judging from Han Mingxi's attitude towards Su Zuidi should be using Han Mingyu. Miss Su's death was due to Han Mingyu's help. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Li Li is indeed quick-witted. Yi Li smiled faintly. It's not hard to guess. To be able to hide the fact that Miss Su is still alive from so many people, one must have great power. But although Elder Su is highly respected, the Su family does not have much power in the capital. If you didn't help Miss Su fake her death, then only the Qiani Pavilion's master, who was very close to Miss Su and admired her, could do it. You wouldn't do such a boring thing, right? Judging from his attitude towards Su Zuidi, he didn't seem like someone who would easily let his fiancée fake her death to escape the marriage. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was not very good, but there was no anger or resentment. He simply didn't want to talk about it. Yi Li tilted her head and thought. Actually, compared to why Miss Su faked her death, I'm more curious about why she went to West Hill after faking her death. If she simply didn't want to marry a seriously injured and disabled person like Mo Xiaoyao, she could have found a Mr. Right in Da Chu State with her beauty after faking her death, or she could have simply been together with Han Mingyu. Leaving some aspects aside, Han Mingyu was definitely one of the best Mr. Right in the eyes of women. Judging from Mo Xiaoyao's attitude towards Su Zuidi and Han Mingyu all these years, even if the two of them were really together, Mo Xiaoyao probably wouldn't retaliate. A lady from a noble family who had lived in the capital since she was young, But after faking her death, she ran thousands of miles to West Hill State. Chapter 236. Is it convenient to talk about Miss Sue's current identity? Yi Li asked curiously. Noble Consort Qingrong of the Shilling Kingdom, by long Noble Consort Qingrong? Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Even if she had no general knowledge, she still remembered that the title of Noble Consort seemed to have only one word. So Su Zuidi's status in the Shilling Kingdom was not low. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li decided not to ask. She only needed to know that between her and Su Zuidi, Mo Xiaoyao was definitely on her side. As for the Noble Consort Qingrong of Shilling, who obviously had feelings for Mo Xiaoyao, or was somewhat unwilling to give up, it was better for her to think about it herself. It was obviously not a good topic to discuss with her husband about his ex-fiancée. Yi Li decided not to talk about it, but Mo Xiaoyao did not think so. He said calmly, the Bai family is one of the 4 major surnames in the Shilling Kingdom. Most of the empresses and noble consorts of the Shilling Kingdom were from the Bai family. This included the current emperor of Shilling's empress. Bai Long entered the palace 7 years ago. At that time, she was named Consort Rong and was favored by the emperor of Shilling. After the empress passed away, she was named Noble Consort Qingrong. If the Emperor of Shilling had not personally asked the Emperor of Shilling to name Noble Consort Hui, who was also from the Bai family, as his empress, she would have been the Emperor of Shilling's empress by now. Yi Li was silent. In less than 10 years, she went from being the second son of the Prince Ding mansion of Da Chu State to almost being the empress of the Emperor of Shilling. It had to be said that Miss Sue's life was very legendary. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's expression, Yi Li hesitated and asked, did you know later that she was not dead, or did you know all along? Mo Xiaoyao's lips sank slightly and said, at that time, I had not recovered from my injury. When I knew, Han Mingyu was about to take her out of the capital. You didn't do anything? Yi Li was curious. With Mo Xiaoyao's original personality, even if he didn't immediately kill Han Mingyu and Su Zuidi, he wouldn't let them leave the capital unharmed. Or if Mo Xiaoyao really loved Su Zuidi, he wouldn't have let her leave the capital. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at her. I was in a bad mood at the time, so I did intend to kill them. However, Elder Su rushed over and personally knelt on the ground to beg me. Elder Su is my first teacher. Su Zuidi's father saved my elder brother's life. Her elder brother also died in that battle to save me. After I calmed down, I let them go. Yi Li nodded silently. If anyone told her that Mo Xiaoyao loved Su Zuidi to the bone again, she would throw them into the water to wash their eyes. The man's voice was as calm as a stranger's. However, even a beauty like Su Zuidi couldn't move Mo Xiaoyao's heart. Have you ever liked Su Zuidi? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li in surprise. He nodded with a faint smile and said, of course I have. Yi Li slightly knit her brows and ignored the uneasiness in her heart. Then why now? Mo Xiaoyao interrupted her and said, she is my fiancée. We grew up together and she might even be my wife in the future. Moreover, she is very beautiful, talented, and has a good temperament. Why don't I like her? However, she always seems to think that I am not good enough for her. After I was injured, she wanted to fake her death and leave. Because of her father and brother, I let her go. Then we don't have any relationship anymore, right? Yi Li nodded. To sum up Mo Xiaoyao's words, Mo Xiaoyao had once felt that Su Zuidi was a perfect fiancé. The men in the Ding King's residence had always been faithful, and it wasn't just a matter of love. As long as they recognized their wife, they would treat her well. So this was the so-called truth of mutual love that was spread in the capital. Since Su Zuidi chose to leave in the end, she naturally had nothing to do with Mo Xiaoyao. So in the eyes of Mo Xiaoyao now, Su Zuidi was just a stranger. She could even be an enemy now. Guangling City itself did not have many things to deal with. But Han Mingshi's actions were very swift. On the same day, the news of Han Mingyu being expelled from the Han family and that the Han family had changed hands with the second young master came out of Guangling City. Even the people of Guangling City did not know much about Han Mingshi. They only knew that the Han family had this second young master and nothing else. Now that the Han family had changed hands, all the wealthy merchants and officials in Guangling City naturally had to pay attention. In this somewhat unexpected hubbub, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li quietly left Guangling City and headed towards the Chu capital. Just as they returned to the capital, Mo Xiaoyao was summoned by the emperor to the palace to discuss matters. Yi Li did not care about how Mo Xiaoyao would explain her disappearance and appearance in Yonglin City. She was already entangled by the people in the palace who were concerned about her. With great difficulty, she managed to appease the wet nurse and Mother Lin. After listening to Steward Mo and Mother Sun report on the recent affairs of the Ding Palace, Yi Li was thinking of going to see Qing Luan and Qing Yu, who were still recuperating, when a servant came to report that Lord Yi and old Madam Yi were asking for an audience. Compared to last year's flush of success, this year's Minister Yi could be said to be covered in dark clouds. At the beginning of the year, Princess Ding's third daughter went missing in the palace. The Zhaoyi's second daughter and little grandson were burned to death. Not even 2 months had passed and the Yi family had not recovered yet. The fourth son-in-law suddenly rebelled. Although the emperor had not yet vented his anger on the Yi family, Minister Yi's days were not so good. Occasionally, Minister Yi could not help but wonder if the heavens did this to him because they did not like him. Therefore, after hearing the news that Prince Ding and Princess Ding had both returned to the capital, Minister Yi did not care about putting on the airs of a father and waited for Yi Li to come home to pay his respects. He directly brought old Madam Yi to the door. Yi Li stepped into the reception pavilion and saw Minister Yi and old Madam Yi's obviously old and haggard appearance. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Father, grandmother. Leah, you finally came back safe and sound." Grandmother was worried to death. Old Madam Yi pulled Yi Li to tears. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "I made grandmother worry. It's Leah's fault." Minister Yi looked at this daughter strangely. He always felt that something was not right. Although he was not very willing to get along with this daughter since his wife passed away, this did not prevent him from knowing Yi Li's situation. This third daughter was quiet and did not like to talk since childhood. But like his wife, she seemed to be born with the grace and elegance of a noble family. But this time when he saw her, Minister Yi keenly found that there seemed to be something between her eyebrows. Even if she was just sitting quietly and letting old Madam Yi hold her hand with a quiet smile, Minister Yi clearly felt a sense of sharpness and pressure that he had never felt before. He could not help but think of the rumors he heard before about Princess Ding suddenly appearing in Yongju and helping General Murong to guard Yonglin. Although not many people knew this news, Minister Yi was the emperor, Prince Li, and Prince Ding's father-in-law. Naturally, he had some unknown channels of information. The credibility of the information he received was definitely much more real than the rumors outside. Looking at the gentle woman with a smile in front of him, Minister Yi's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He had a daughter who hid it well. This daughter even hid it from him, her father, and he used her as an abandoned pawn. Chapter 237. How have father and grandmother been recently? After the servants served tea and left, Yi Li asked softly. Minister Yi froze for a moment and looked at Yi Li's expression before replying, "They're fine, but your fourth sister, she." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Prince Li didn't take fourth sister with him when he left the capital. Minister Yi shook his head. Fortunately, Mo Jingli didn't take Yi Ying away. Otherwise, the Yi family and Prince Li wouldn't be able to escape the crime of conspiring to rebel. Although Yi Ying was now under house arrest, the emperor finally believed that the Yi family didn't wallow in the mire with Prince Li. Yi Li lowered her head and thought for a moment before asking, who did Prince Li take with him when he left the capital? Minister Yi had nothing to hide and said in a deep voice, he only took that woman from Nanjiang. Even consort Xianzhao was left in the capital. The Empress Dowager has already brought consort Xianzhao to the palace. But now that Prince Li has rebelled, the Empress Dowager's life isn't easy. Thinking of this, Minister Yi felt regret in his heart. It was true that he was the Empress Dowager's man and he was biased towards Prince Li. But he never thought that Prince Li would suddenly rebel. If he had known that Prince Li was so crazy, he would have followed the emperor wholeheartedly. At least he had a Jiaoyi daughter and a prince's grandson. Now he had nothing. Fourth sister is under house arrest by the emperor? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked, why didn't Prince Li take her away? After all, she is his legal wife. Prince Li shouldn't not know what will happen to her if he leaves her in the capital. Minister Yi sighed helplessly and said, Ying-er is already 2 months pregnant. It's not suitable for a long journey. Yi Li's mind turned. She looked up at Minister Yi and old Madam Yi and smiled faintly. Prince Li doesn't know that fourth sister is pregnant, right? No matter how cruel Mo Jingli was, he wouldn't abandon his own flesh and blood, not to mention that Yi Ying was pregnant with his only child. The only possibility was that he did not know that Yi Ying was pregnant, and Yi Ying had found an excuse to stay. Old Madam Yi felt a bit guilty under her gaze and said embarrassedly, that Princess Shixia isn't a good person and Prince Li spoils her too much. With Ying-er's scheming, the child would be gone before she could even reach Lingju. In any case, Prince Li spends most of his time in the capital every year, so we thought of letting Ying-er stay in the capital to wait for delivery. How could Yi Li not understand old Madam Yi's intentions? Yi Jiaoyi and the little prince in the palace had died. Yi Ying finally had Prince Li's child. Naturally, she wanted to keep the child in the capital so that the child could be close to the Yi family in the future. But they didn't expect that Mo Jingli didn't even bother to inform them that he was going to attack. However, they had inadvertently saved the Yi family. Of course, the reason why the emperor did not punish the Yi family was probably because they were related to the Wang family. Yi Li sighed and looked at Minister Yi. Father, I'm afraid that the emperor already knows about fourth sister's pregnancy. He hasn't done anything to her yet. I'm afraid that he wants to use her child to threaten Prince Li. Minister Yi had already thought of this. He didn't really come to the Prince Ding mansion for Yi Ying. Then Yi Li raised her hand to stop him from speaking. She looked at Minister Yi and said, Father, this official knows that I don't understand. But the most taboo thing for those in power is for the people below to be disloyal. Father, you can't really think that the emperor doesn't know anything, right? In Li Er's opinion, Prince Li is not the opponent of that person in the palace. Minister Yi's expression changed slightly. You mean? Yi Li lowered her head and drank tea. She didn't answer and let Minister Yi sit there with his expression changing. Old Madam Yi couldn't sit still and quickly asked, Li Er, what should we do now? Yi Li said faintly, Father, report Prince Li's crime as soon as possible and ask for forgiveness from the emperor. As for the future, the emperor will no longer trust the Yi family. So father, it's best to ask the emperor to remove you from the position of minister. In the future, it's better to keep a low profile and teach Brother Rome well. This. Minister Yi and old Madam Yi were stunned. There was an unwilling expression on their faces. After thinking for a while, old Madam Yi looked at Yi Li cautiously and said, Li Er, Prince Ding has just quelled the rebellion in Yongju. Should we ask him? Looking at old Madam Yi's hopeful expression, Yi Li sneered and said faintly, Prince Ding's residence has done a lot to quell the rebellion. Grandmother doesn't know. Don't tell me that father doesn't know the current situation of Prince Ding's residence. Minister Yi could only sigh dejectedly. It was because Prince Ding's residence had done a lot that it was impossible to plead for him. The more Prince Ding pleaded, the more the emperor would suppress the Yi family. Minister Yi didn't know whether he should be resentful or not. Because of Prince Ding's residence, the emperor will never use the Yi family again. But it was also because of Prince Ding's residence, because his daughter was Princess Ding, the Yi family was saved from the disaster. Father, if you can pick it up, then you can let it go. When it's time to fight, fight. When it's time to retreat, retreat. No matter how good the fame and fortune are, can it be better than your own name? Yi Li said softly. Minister Yi paused for a while and there was a struggle on his face. Looking at Yi Li, he said, if in the future. Yi Li interrupted him. Father, be careful with your words. Minister Yi finally lowered his head dejectedly. He sighed and didn't say anything else. Old Madam Yi also understood that Yi Li had personally rejected asking Prince Ding to plead for leniency. She had cut off the last hope of the Yi family. Thinking that she would no longer be the old madam of minister's residence and that the Yi family would decline, she couldn't help but feel resentment in her heart. Leah, how can you be so cruel? No matter how wrong your father is, he is still your father. Our Yi family is still your maternal family. What good will it do you if the Yi family declines? Prince Ding's residence doesn't have any relatives. Don't you want people to help you in the court in the future? Help? Yi Li murmured softly. She looked up at old Madam Yi's pained expression. Father and grandmother, have you gone to see eldest sister and Prince Nan? Old Madam Yi was speechless. They had already gone to Prince Li's residence when he was in trouble. Unfortunately, Prince Nan's residence had closed its doors and refused visitors. They didn't even see Prince Nan and Prince Nan. Only a few days ago, Yi Zhen had quietly returned to Yi's residence once. The meaning behind her words was that Prince Nan's residence couldn't help. After all, as a subject, no one dared to provoke a rebellion. Last year, eldest uncle mentioned to me that father had been cautious all his life. These 2 years, he was a bit arrogant. I also mentioned it to grandmother. Unfortunately, at that time, grandmother and father only thought that I was resentful and jealous of second sister and fourth sister because I was married into the Prince Ding mansion. Now that things have come to this, not to mention that Prince Ding is unable to plead for father, even if he could, has father thought about how you will stand in the court in the future? On the way back, I also heard that these days, the emperor dotes on imperial concubine Yun and Wang Jiaorong. He even faintly revealed that he wanted to make imperial concubine Liu's son the crown prince. It seems that he wants to use the Yun and Wang family's people. The Liu family is even more popular. Father, whether it is the Liu family or the Yun and Wang families, they are all prestigious families. And the most important thing is, they don't get along with the Yi family. Father still doesn't understand the emperor's meaning. Chapter 238. In an instant, Minister Yi seemed to have aged 10 years. He said hoarsely, I know. I'll go back and ask the emperor for forgiveness. Seeing Minister Yi's aged appearance, Yi Li secretly shook her head. She was not moved. Some people were born to view fame and fortune as more important than their lives, but there was no other way. Prince is back. The atmosphere in the parlor was a bit gloomy. A maid's voice came from outside the door. Before she finished speaking, Mo Xiaoyao had already entered the hall. After returning to the capital, he was called into the palace by Mo Xiaoyao before he even had time to change his clothes. Mo Xiaoyao was still wearing a white robe. There was a trace of tiredness between his brows that was hard to detect. Greetings to Prince. Minister Yi and old Madam Yi hurriedly stood up and bowed. Mo Xiaoyao nodded slightly. He walked to Yi Li's side and sat down. Lord Yi, old Madam is here to see Li Li? Minister Yi nodded awkwardly and said, That's right. Leah has been missing for several months. Mother and I are very worried. So when we heard that Prince brought Leah back, we hurriedly came to see. Mo Xiaoyao nodded calmly. He naturally did not care about this excuse. If they were worried, they would have been worried long ago. Why would they wait until now to worry? In these 2 months, the Yi family did not even send anyone to the Prince Ding mansion to ask about her, let alone send people to look for her. Even the Marquis Nan's mansion sent people to ask twice. In the eyes of outsiders, the Yi family was not only cold, but also heartless. Nurse Sun said that as soon as you came back, you were busy with the mansion's affairs. If you're tired, you should rest first. It won't be too late to talk about those trivial matters in a few days. Ignoring Minister Yi and old Madam Yi, Mo Xiaoyao turned to whisper to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled and shook her head. How could Minister Yi not see that Prince Ding did not want to see him? He was embarrassed to stay and could only stand up and leave. Looking at the cultured and elegant man sitting beside Yi Li, who could not conceal his awe-inspiring majesty, other than the silver mask that covered half of his face, where did he look sickly and disabled? If Prince Ding were to fully recover, the Ding royal residence's rise would be an ironclad matter. She only hated herself for having eyes but not being able to see. Back then, because the Ding Palace was a taboo subject to the Emperor and Prince Ding's health, she had neglected them. Now, it was too late to regret. Why did His Majesty summon you to the palace in such a hurry? Yi Li asked after having people send Minister Yi and old Madam Yi out. Mo Xiaoyao rubbed the space between his eyebrows and frowned. The emperor plans to marry a princess to the northern tribes for peace. Political marriage? Yi Li couldn't help but think of the marriage with shilling Princess Lingyun last year. She frowned in confusion and asked, who does the emperor plan to send to the marriage? All of the previous emperor's princesses had already been married. Among Mo Jingqi's own daughters, the oldest seemed to be Princess Chang'e, who was 8 years old this year. Mo Xiaoyao calmly said, naturally, he will choose from the capital's nobility or the imperial family. The Duke of Hua's granddaughter is also on the list. Tian Xiong. Yi Li frowned. The northern tribes was a bitter and cold place. Furthermore, everyone knew that the emperor chose this marriage to free up his hands to deal with the Prince of Li. Once the matter with the Prince of Li was over, who would remember that there was a woman in the distant northern tribes? If the two countries were to go to war, the princess in the marriage would only be a sacrifice. Mo Xiaoyao said, you don't need to be too worried. His Majesty has to give face to the Duke of Hua and the Empress. Furthermore, if he really wants to marry the northern tribes, he will most likely choose someone from the imperial family. After all, the people of the northern tribes are not so easily fooled. Yi Li nodded and asked curiously, does the emperor need to specially summon you to the palace to discuss the marriage with the northern tribes? Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled into a mocking smile. When the princess is to be married, the emperor wishes for me to represent the Da Chu state in sending the bride off. He also wishes for me to attend the king of the northern tribe's 60th birthday celebration in the 9th month. For the Prince of Dingguo to personally send the bride off, this type of marriage was somewhat unexpected. Yi Li furrowed her brows in thought. After a while, she raised her head and asked, the emperor wishes for you to be transferred away from the Da Chu state. Why? The capital of the northern tribes was far in the north. If they wanted to make it in time for the king of the northern tribe's birthday celebration in the 9th month, the wedding procession would have to leave in the middle of the 7th month. Even if they rushed back after the wedding, Mo Xiaoyao would be back in the 10th month at the very least. In other words, Mo Xiaoyao would not be in the Da Chu state for nearly 3 months. No one could imagine how many things could happen in 3 months. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. The emperor has made many preparations these years. It is hard to guess what he wants to do in such a short period of time. It was not hard to guess the thoughts of a smart person. It was also not hard to guess the thoughts of an idiot. However, it was hard to guess the thoughts of those who were bold and imaginative. For example, Mo Jingli. Even someone as smart as Mo Xiaoyao and Xu Qingchen would never have thought that he would start a rebellion at that time. Because anyone could tell at a glance that it was impossible for him to succeed. In reality, even if Mo Jingli really joined forces with the southern border to break through Shattered Snow Pass, Mo Jingli would not gain much of an advantage. It would only make the people at the border suffer. As the emperor, how much did Mo Jingqi care about the suffering of the people? Then you agree? Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and smiled calmly. The emperor's orders cannot be disobeyed. Yi Li shrugged helplessly. I understand. I will stay in the capital. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and smiled. No, you will go to Yunju when the time comes. Yi Li raised her brows and looked at him in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Prince Ding is not the emperor. The Ding King Manor is not the imperial palace. There is no need for someone to guard it. Mo Jingqi, sometimes, when he is forced into a corner, he likes to use tricks that harm others without benefiting himself. I will be more assured if you go to Yunju. The true core of the Ding King Manor was not in the capital, but the people in the manor. Even if the Ding King Manor was razed to the ground, as long as the owner was still alive, the Ding King Manor would still be the Ding King Manor. Yi Li shook her head. That is even more impossible. If I go to Yunju, won't I put grandfather and the rest in danger? Don't tell me that Mo Jingqi won't act against Yunju. Since they dared to act against the Prince Ding mansion, why would they be afraid of the Shu family? Besides, the Prince Ding mansion's opponent is not just the one in the imperial palace. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li quietly. After a long time, he sighed. Li Li, I can't seem to let you live a peaceful life. Yi Li chuckled softly. Of course I can live a peaceful life. You can find a place where no one knows and hide me. But I don't like that. Do you understand? Just like this trip to Nanjiang. I don't have to go. I can send someone. Even if no one goes, Big Brother will be fine. Even if I can't appear in front of people for the time being, I can find a place to live in seclusion for a while. It's because I want to go out for a walk that I want to go. Also, I feel that I like the days outside more. Even if there was danger outside, at least she had a clear goal and could distinguish between friend and foe. Once she returned to the capital, Yi Li felt a headache when she thought of facing those people who laughed and spoke warmly to each other but stabbed her in the back. It wasn't that she didn't know how to, but she didn't like it. I also feel that when Li Li is outside, she is even more stunning. Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly. In the capital, Li Li always had a faint smile on her face. She was gentle and elegant as if she was a qualified princess consort from a scholarly family. Mo Xiaoyao would never tell anyone that when he shot that arrow outside Yonglin City, he saw the woman in front of him wearing the same black clothes as the Black Cloud Cavalry. When she looked back, she had a cold and proud aura and a dazzling starlight in her eyes. There had never been a moment when he clearly understood that his princess consort was not only a graceful woman who held a scroll under the lamp, but also an outstanding figure who could move unhindered on the battlefield. Mo Xiaoyao suddenly thought of the oath he had made many years ago in front of his father and elder brother. Mo Xiaoyao's wife will be like my ancestor, Princess Qingyun, and follow me to conquer the world. Hand in hand, we will see the rivers and mountains together. That arrow, Mo Xiaoyao felt that perhaps what he shot out was not only the arrow that saved Li, but also his heart. Chapter 239. Yi Li's jade face blushed slightly. Ever since they reunited in Yonglin City, she and Mo Xiaoyao were always a bit strange when they interacted. Usually, she didn't think too much about it when there was something to do, but when it was quiet, it always made her feel uncomfortable. She wasn't some wooden block that didn't understand romance. Ever since that kiss outside Shattering Snow Pass, she naturally understood that the two of them were no longer close friends like before. But when facing Mo Xiaoyao, she couldn't bring out the freedom and casualness that she had when she was in love in her previous life. This kind of uncontrollable emotion made her feel some annoyance towards Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao seemed to understand her feelings and didn't provoke her too much. But when the two of them interacted in private, they were more intimate and gentle than before. How are Qing Luan and Qing Yu? Can you let them out? Yi Li tilted her head and asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. It's nothing. Not letting them out is for their safety. Now that you've safely returned, it's naturally fine. I'll let them out later. Returning to her own courtyard, Qing Luan and Qing Yu's complexions were really good. It seemed that no one had made things difficult for them in these 2 months. Qing Xia and Qing Shuang were also busy surrounding Yi Li, giving her tonics and new clothes as if she had suffered greatly outside. Yi Li was helpless and could only let the servant girls busy themselves. When they calmed down a little, she sent Qing Xia and Qing Shuang away, leaving only Qing Yu and Qing Luan in front of her. Newbie has been negligent. Wang Fei, please punish. The room quieted down and Qing Yu and Qing Luan both knelt down. Rise. Yi Li frowned and looked at the two, asking, have you been well these 2 months? Qing Yu and Qing Luan couldn't help but wipe their tears. Qing Luan nodded repeatedly and said, we are fine, but we are very worried about the princess. If anything happens to the princess, we won't have the face to see the old master and the eldest master even if we die 10,000 times. Seeing the obvious joy and relief on their faces, Yi Li also understood that these two girls had been worried for the past 2 months. She sighed softly and said, what are you hiding? I understand Prince's temperament. You are my people. If you didn't hide something from me, he wouldn't have put you under house arrest for the past 2 months. Is it inconvenient to tell Prince, or is it something you can't even tell me? The two of them couldn't help but glance at each other. They looked at Yi Li with hesitation in their eyes. Yi Li didn't rush them. She just looked at them indifferently. After a long while, Qingyu looked at Yi Li and finally made up her mind. She said, "We servants have indeed failed in our duties." Actually, this servant had already left Yaohua Palace before the fire. After that, Qing Luan also left in order to save this servant. So, after the fire in Yaohua Palace, the shadow guard couldn't find us. Yi Li nodded. Then, where did you go? This servant saw a person, so I followed. Qing Yu whispered. This servant heard Qing Yu's scream and followed. Qing Luan continued. Yi Li frowned. Who did you see? Qing Yu whispered, Suzuidi, and Prince. Suzuidi and Prince. Yi Li blinked in surprise. You mean you saw Suzuidi and Prince together in the palace, so you followed them? Are you sure you saw Suzuidi? Qing Yu lowered her head and thought for a while. This servant has seen the painting of Chujing country sent by others at the wedding of Prince and Princess. It is at least 70 to 80% similar to the woman in the painting. There are not many people who look so beautiful even in the palace. And Your Highness, that is why this servant. Yi Li nodded slightly. She understood why these two girls had been unwilling to tell the truth to Mo Xiaoyao. So, you saw Prince meeting a woman who looked very similar to Suzuidi in the palace, and it happened that Yaohua Palace was on fire and I was missing, so you deliberately concealed it and refused to tell him the truth. Qing Yu bit her lip and nodded. Yi Li thought for a while and asked, have you ever thought, if Prince's legs were inconvenient at that time, wouldn't it be too eye-catching to meet a woman in the palace? With Prince's martial arts, he shouldn't let you get too close. If you didn't get close, how can you be sure that the person you saw was Suzuidi and Prince? Qing Yu said, this servant is not sure whether that woman is Suzuidi or not. But the man's voice is definitely Prince's. Yi Li frowned. She knew about Qing Yu's hearing. Qing Yu's hearing was very good since she was a child, even better than Qing Luan who practiced martial arts since childhood. As long as she heard the voice once, she would never forget it, not to mention that she saw Mo Xiaoyao every day. Then what about Qing Luan? This servant heard Qing Yu's scream. Although Qing Yu knows how to use poison, she doesn't know martial arts, so this servant immediately rushed over. But as soon as she saw Qing Yu's back, she fainted. Qing Yu frowned and said, this servant heard that Prince was indeed shocked and then knocked out. But, it was just a very low voice, it was impossible to alarm Qing Luan. Yi Li smiled and said, you guys have worked hard these past 2 months. Tell me, what do you think? The two couldn't help but look at each other. Qing Luan carefully glanced at Yi Li before saying, this servant didn't think anything. Qing Yu said, this servant suspected Prince and someone, then heard that Princess was missing, so, Yi Li smiled and said, so you suspect that Prince and others conspired to kill me? Qing Yu's face turned red. Qing Luan stared at Qing Yu with her eyes wide open, looking frightened. Yi Li understood that what they said should be true. After all, Qing Luan and Qing Yu lived separately in these 2 months. There was no chance to see each other at all. The secret guards had also found them from different places. Unless they had made a confession before the secret guards found them, there was nothing they could say about the two of them. These 2 months, Qing Luan was very quiet. It was just that in the beginning, she cried every day. On the contrary, Qing Yu, who had always been quiet, always tried to escape and was always hostile to the people in the Wangfu. If it was because Qing Yu saw Mo Xiaoyao and Qing Luan didn't see him, it would make sense. After thinking for a while, Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. Qing Yu, don't mention this matter again in the future. I believe in Prince, understand? Qing Yu frowned slightly and wanted to say something. Yi Li said faintly, sometimes, what you hear with your ears may not be the truth. Have you ever thought that if it was really Prince, with Prince's meticulous mind, would he appear in the palace on the day he knew that I entered the palace? In addition, The biggest flaw is that all of you are still alive. You were knocked unconscious because you found out about Prince. Then, forget about Qing Luan, why are you still safe and sound until now? This is the Ding Palace. If His Highness wants to silence people, not to mention all of you, even I, the princess consort, would not be able to escape. Do you understand? Qing Yu's face turned pale. Princess consort's meaning is. Qing Luan was puzzled and said, if the other party wants to sow discord, does he know that the princess is fine in the fire? Chapter 240. Yi Li nodded and said with a smile, it's very likely. However, if something really happens to me, and the prince knows that you are indeed innocent, he will naturally let you go. What will Qing Yu do after going out? Qing Yu said firmly, naturally, I will report this matter to the old master and the eldest young master, and seek justice for Miss. Qing Luan exclaimed, the other party wants to sow discord between the Ding King's mansion and the Shu family? Yi Li held her forehead and said, whether he wants to sow discord between me and the prince, or sow discord between the Prince Ding mansion and the Shu family, it depends on whether he knows about the fire in Yaohua Palace. In fact, it's the same. If my relationship with the prince is broken, how can the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Shu family be good? Qing Yu said with a pale face, I suspect that the prince did something wrong. But what she couldn't figure out was who that person was. She was definitely more confident in her ears than her eyes. It doesn't matter. Fortunately, the prince also suspected that you knew something dangerous, so he put you under house arrest. Now, there are no bad consequences. As for the prince you mentioned, I will check what's going on later. Yi Li said with a smile, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Sure enough, as soon as she returned to the capital, there were endless troubles. Then let her see if there was a second Su Zuidi and Mo Xiaoyao in the capital. Qing Yu nodded seriously and said, this servant also wants to know who can deceive this servant's ears. Yi Li smiled faintly. Seeing with one's own eyes could deceive people, let alone hearing with one's ears. However, she also wanted to know who could know her and the people around her so well. Yi Li told Mo Xiaoyao about Qing Yu and Qing Luan, and Mo Xiaoyao turned around and ordered people to investigate. No matter who the person impersonating Mo Xiaoyao was, that woman was definitely not Su Zuidi. There was someone who wanted to use this matter to sow discord between the two of them and even the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Shu family. It could be seen that this person absolutely understood the Prince Ding mansion and Mo Xiaoyao himself. As for being impersonated, Mo Xiaoyao wasn't worried at all. This was because the subordinates in King Ding's residence had always accepted orders and not people. Although the prince and princess consort were not an exception, but everyone knew that Prince Ding would never casually give orders to the people below him. Moreover, if those shadow guards couldn't even recognize the real prince, they wouldn't be able to survive. On the second day after returning to Beijing, Yi Li personally went to the Shu family to visit her uncle and aunt. Although ordinary people didn't know about what happened in Yonglin City, it definitely couldn't be hidden from the influential officials in the palace who had various channels of information. Moreover, Mo Xiaoyao had recovered and naturally had to take on the responsibility of being the Prince of Ding country, so Yi Li, Princess Ding, naturally didn't need to deliberately keep a low profile. As soon as she stepped into the Shu family's residence, Shu Qingyang came out like a gust of wind, pulling Yi Li and chattering non-stop. Seeing this, the veins on Shu Hongyan's forehead were throbbing. Qingyang. Shu Qingyan's face stiffened and he winked at Yi Li for help before turning back to smile at Shu Hongyang. Second uncle, aren't we happy to see Sister Li come back? Shu Qingze looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Shu Qingbai glanced at him unhappily and said, we are all very happy that Li is back. Look at you. Fortunately, we're not in Yunju. If grandfather and father saw you, they would definitely punish you. Shu Qingyang shrunk his neck and made a face at his fourth brother. Yi Li felt warmth in her heart when she saw her relatives. She smiled and said, second uncle, second brother, fourth brother, don't blame fifth brother. Li is also very happy to see you after not seeing you for a long time. Xu Hongyang looked at Yi Li and nodded with satisfaction. It seems that you didn't suffer outside these days. Your complexion is much better than when you were in Beijing. Madame Xu had already come forward and pulled Yi Li to ask about her well-being. She felt sorry for her for going out alone and felt that she had lost a lot of weight and needed to be nourished. Knowing that they had serious matters to discuss, Madame Xu pulled Yi Li aside and said a few words. Then she turned around and ordered the kitchen to prepare lunch, leaving her husband and sons alone. After entering the study and sitting down, before she could say anything, Xu Qingyang couldn't stop fidgeting. He looked at Yi Li and said, "Sister Li, you really went to guard Yonglin?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows in surprise and said, "Even you know about it?" It seems that news spread quickly in the border city. Xu Qingyang waved his hand and said, "Sister Li, you don't know. Some news is indeed a secret outside, but once it reaches the capital, it's no longer a secret. There are many people who know about this. A few days ago, someone asked me about you in a roundabout way. Humph. Are you bullying me because I'm young and easy to fool?" Xu Qingzi nodded and looked at Yi Li. Little Wu is right. There aren't many sources of information that can reach Shattered Snow Pass. But in this capital, there aren't many secrets that can be hidden. Yi Li waved her hand and said, "That's fine. I've already discussed this with the prince. Originally, it wasn't a secret that Princess Ding could mobilize the Black Cloud Cavalry. After all, I went to Yonglin on the battlefield. There are many things that can't be hidden even if I want to. It doesn't matter if people know about it." Xu Hongyang frowned and said, "Prince means." Looking at the beautiful niece in front of him who looked similar to his little sister, Xu Hongyang wasn't sure if it was what he thought. After all, although the Ding prince didn't like women, he was very respectful to the princess regardless of her background. But the princess who truly controlled the military power of the Prince Ding mansion was only Princess Qing Yun 100 years ago. If Prince Ding and Li Er. Although he was happy that Prince Ding valued and trusted his niece, Xu Hongyang was worried about this. Once she controlled the military power of the Ding mansion, Li Er would no longer be as simple as a princess. When the time came, the problems that she would face wouldn't be something that her uncle could help her with. Yi Li looked at Xu Hongyang and said seriously, "Li Er understands uncle's worries, but, since the day of the wedding, Li Er has been tied to the Prince Ding mansion. If some things can't be avoided, then there is no harm in facing them head-on. It's better to have two people than one." Xu Hongyang couldn't help but sigh. Although he didn't ask about the emperor's actions in court these days, it wasn't that he didn't understand. Ever since Prince Li raised his troops, the emperor had supported the Liu, Wang, and Yun families. It could even be said that he didn't hide the fact that he used the eradication of Prince Li's faction to suppress the former officials of the Prince Ding mansion. These years, the emperor had placed many people in court. Now, the Wang and Yun families had suddenly replaced the original Yi family and even had the tendency to surpass the Hua family. What was worse was that for some reason, the Liu, Wang, and Yun families had secretly formed a group. Originally, the separation of the three powers wasn't very obvious, but now, in the blink of an eye, the emperor's people had taken the lead. Xu Qingyang wouldn't believe that the emperor's actions were to deal with Prince Li. Xu Hongyang naturally understood that the emperor didn't put his younger brother in his eyes. His true goal was always the Prince Ding mansion. Chapter 241. Xu Qingzi's voice was cold as usual, but there was a faint warmth in his eyes as he looked at Yi Li. If Li Er has the ability, then there's no harm in accepting it. Xu Hongyang nodded helplessly and looked at Yi Li lovingly. "Your first uncle mentioned it in his letter a few days ago. Since you were able to bring people to Yongju, he probably guessed Prince Ding's intentions. But you have to be careful in the future. Other than your third brother, everyone in our family is a scholar, so I'm afraid they won't be of much help." Xu Hongyang wasn't a military officer, but that didn't mean he didn't understand military officers. Military officers were different from civil officials, especially famous generals on the battlefield. They didn't care about your identity or status. If you couldn't convince the public, even if you were the emperor's daughter, they wouldn't listen to you. Yi Li nodded and smiled. Second uncle, don't worry. This time in Yongju, Prince Ding gave me a pretty good lieutenant under General Murong's command, as well as the Black Cloud Cavalry's commander who was guarding Yonglin. We can all be considered acquaintances, so there's no need to worry too much. As for the other matters, we can talk about it later. Xu Hongyan's brows relaxed as he nodded. Prince Ding is still the most considerate. Xu Qingyang smiled. If he knew Li Er could lead the Mohist army, why would third brother run to the barracks himself? Wouldn't it be fine if he just followed Li Er? Xu Hongyang glared at him. Nonsense, if Qingfeng didn't have a future in the barracks, wouldn't he be a burden to Li Er? If he had a future, why wouldn't it be the same? Xu Qingyang blinked. I just feel that with third brother here, Li Er would be more at ease. Yi Li smiled. It's too early to say this. I don't have time to manage the Mohist army right now. Moreover, with third brother's personality, if he knew that it was because of me that he entered the Mohist army, I'm afraid he would run far away and insist on making a name for himself. Thinking of his son's temperament, Xu Hongyang couldn't help but smile, but he seemed to be very satisfied. He said earnestly to Yi Li, although Prince trusts you, you have to remember that there are many things that you have to distinguish between public and private matters. Whether it was the royal family or anything else, the biggest taboo was having too many relatives. Does Li Er understand? Yi Li's heart warmed as she nodded and said, Li Er understands. Many thanks for uncle's teachings. Seeing that Yi Li had listened to his words, Xu Hongyang nodded with relief and sighed softly. Li Er was really different from his smart but weak little sister. Although Li Er's surname was not Xu, he still had a kind of pride and gratification of having a daughter in his family. She believed that her father would be extremely happy to see such a Li Er. Yi Li then recounted her trip to Nanzhao and Shu Qingchen in detail. Xu Hongyang frowned in disapproval and said, putting yourself in danger, Qingchen is taking too much of a risk. Xu Qingbai wasn't worried about his big brother's safety at all. He smiled and said, second uncle, don't worry. When has big brother ever done something he wasn't confident in? Didn't Li Er also say that even if she didn't go to Nanjiang, big brother would still be able to escape? Xu Qingyang nodded and said, fourth brother is right. Sister Li, is that saintess of Nanjiang very beautiful? Why did she capture big brother but not harm him? She didn't even force a confession out of him. Could it be that she has taken a fancy to big brother? It had to be said that to a certain extent, Xu Qingyang was speaking the truth. Yi Li blinked and shook her head with some regret. I haven't seen the saintess of Nanjiang, but she shouldn't be bad. Xu Qingbai raised his brows and said, I feel that Princess Anshi is interested in big brother. Second brother, tell me. Xu Qingze put down his teacup and said indifferently, neither is possible. Big brother only sees Princess Anshi as a friend. Xu Qingyang hid behind Xu Qingbai and bared his teeth at his second brother. He muttered in a low voice, you're so unromantic. I really don't know how Sister Qin can stand you. Xu Qingbai looked curiously at Yi Li and asked, Leah lied to Princess Anshi that you're big brother's fiancé. What did big brother say? Hearing this, Xu Qingyan's eyes lit up and he stared at Yi Li. Yi Li gritted her teeth in annoyance. She should have known that she had been deceived by big brother. He didn't even write a letter to tell uncle and the others about it. In the end, she was the one who exposed the truth. She carefully glanced at her second uncle and said in a low voice, big brother didn't say anything. And, he even used me as a shield. Xu Hongyang shook his head helplessly and said, your status is different. Although it's important to investigate your big brother's whereabouts, you have to be careful about your reputation. Li Er understands. Xu Hongyang didn't reprimand her. Yi Li sighed in relief and laughed crisply. Right, I haven't congratulated second brother, fourth brother, and fifth brother for passing the imperial examinations. Xu Hongyang shook his head and glared at Xu Qingyang in annoyance. Although things hadn't been going well since the beginning of spring, the triennial imperial examinations were still held as usual. Originally, it wasn't a big deal. After all, no one thought that the sons of the Xu family would fail. However, The fact that the three sons of the Shu family had passed the imperial examinations at the same time inevitably raised eyebrows. Shu Qingyang pursed his lips in grievance and said, "I was just casually writing." Who knew that the questions this year would be so simple? Under the gaze of everyone in the room, Shu Qingyang finally couldn't argue anymore and could only lower his head guiltily. How could he say that he had given it his all because some son of a noble family had mocked him a few times? Yi Li smiled and said, "So this time. Second brother came in third, fifth brother came in fourth, and fourth brother came in 19th. Shu Qingyang stole a glance at Shu Qingbai and lowered his head even more guiltily. Of course, he knew that fourth brother's talent was definitely above his own. Second brother could definitely leave the top and second place far behind. However, they had purposely held back their true abilities. He had indeed done his best, but he had only gotten fourth place. Seeing Shu Qingyan's guilty appearance, Yi Li advised, "Second uncle, this is nothing. If fifth brother really failed, I'm afraid that people would be suspicious." Shu Hongyang frowned and said, he shouldn't have participated in the imperial examinations this year. Speaking of this, Shu Hongyang also felt helpless. Qingyang was only 14 years old, and Qingbai was only 16 or 17. As a man, even if he was a member of the Shu family, who didn't want to be famous and have a good achievement? The children of the Shu family, whether it was the steady Shu Qingze or the lively Shu Qingyang, if they weren't part of the Shu family, they would definitely be the top scorers of the imperial examinations. Their future prospects would naturally be limitless. However, as part of the Shu family, they could only have empty ambitions. They could enjoy the false reputation of the Shu family, but they couldn't do anything. This was all because of the Shu family's reputation. Shu Hongyang would always remember the heavy and apologetic expression his father had when he left the capital with his eldest brother. He used to have the heart to help the world, but unfortunately, the royal family didn't need his ambition. The royal family only needed him to stay in the seemingly noble position of imperial censor, which actually had no real power, to show the world the royal family's benevolence. Since second brother, fourth brother, and fifth brother are all on the imperial examinations, will they stay in the capital? Yi Li asked. Shu Qingze and Shu Qingbai were fine. Shu Qingze was already 20 years old, and his temperament was even more steady. Although Shu Qingbai was still young, he was indeed the most experienced and skilled in the Shu family. Not only was Shu Qingyang young, but his temperament was also like a child who hadn't grown up. Shu Hongyang shook his head and said, "Your second brother and fourth brother will stay. I've already sent a memorial to the emperor. Qingyang is still young, and his father is old. He needs to return to Yunju to serve his father." Chapter 242. Will the emperor agree? In Mo Jingqi's eyes, keeping Shu Qingyang was far more useful than keeping Shu Qingbai. Shu Hongyang smiled calmly. Xiao Wu is the youngest in the Shu family. Of all virtues, filial piety is the most important. The emperor has no choice but to agree. Since second uncle was so confident, Yi Li did not ask any more questions. She changed her mind to care about Shu Qingze and Shu Qingbai's positions. Shu Qingze, as the Tanhua, was sent to Hanlin Academy to be an editor. Shu Qingbai, as a scholar, was sent to the Ministry of Rites as a substitute. They were all idle positions without any real power. Compared to the top scholars and scholars, their ranks were the highest, but at the same time, they had the least power. Especially Shu Qingbai. His salary as the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Rites was indeed an empty title. Who knew when he would be able to make up for it? Most importantly, Shu Qingze and Shu Qingbai's personalities were not suitable for their positions. It would be better if they were swapped. Second brother must stay in the capital. If fourth brother can, it's best if he's sent out. Shu Qingbai looked young and gentle, but his thoughts were deep. He was a classic example of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. If it were not for the Shu family, even if he was born in an ordinary family, he would most likely become an important official before the age of 36. Actually, Shu Qingbai was the most suitable person in the Shu family to be an official. Shu Hongyang shook his head. How could the emperor be at ease to send him out? Yi Li frowned. Not necessarily. Fourth brother is still young. Perhaps the emperor will be more at ease. But I'm afraid it'll be hard on fourth brother. Shu Qingbai smiled lightly. The places the emperor is willing to send me to are those barren hills and unruly rivers. But it's better than staying in the capital, doing nothing and being controlled by others. Shu Hongyang looked at Shu Qingbai. He understood that he was moved by Yi Li's suggestion. That's right. If he had a choice, he would rather be sent out. Even if he was a county official, it was better than staying in the capital and listening to those civil officials talk. After thinking for a moment, Shu Hongyang nodded and said, "That's fine. Right now, the emperor is busy. He should agree to this concession." Shu Qingbai nodded and said with a faint smile, "Many thanks, second uncle." Shu Hongyang waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say more. Yi Li accompanied her uncle and aunt to have lunch and prepared to return to the Fu. Before leaving, Shu Hongyang instructed in a deep voice, in the future, you must be careful of the people in the palace." Yi Li was stunned. She looked at her uncle in surprise. Shu Hongyang just waved his hand and didn't say anything more. Yi Li had no choice but to bid farewell to her uncle and aunt before turning around to return home. When he returned to his residence, there were already 2 thick piles of invitation cards and banquet invitations from the various residences in the capital. Yi Li flipped through the photos and picked out a few important ones to reply to. She felt a headache coming on as she realized that she might need one or more all-around assistants. Qing Xia and Qing Shuang didn't know much to begin with. Although Qing Luan and Qing Yu each had their own strengths, they had nothing to do with this. Han Mingxi was a good candidate, but he was too eye-catching. After going through the people around her that she could use, she finally called over an and an San and threw them a pile of documents to be dealt with. An San had a bitter face as he realized that they originally didn't need to do anything and only needed to secretly follow their master's shadow guard. Then they became the personal bodyguards of the young masters, the all-around bodyguards of the eldest young miss, and the all-around bodyguards of the Princess Ding. Then they became the accountants of the Ding Palace, as well as various stewards. The power was so big that An San couldn't help but tremble. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Princess consort. I don't understand this. Go and learn. Yi Li's pen was like the wind as she read through the documents in her hands. She didn't even raise her head as she said. An San had a bitter face. Princess consort, we are the shadow guard. Yi Li faintly raised her head and glanced at him, saying, I don't need a shadow guard. In the future, Qin Feng will follow me. He is the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry. An San unwillingly muttered. Even if Princess Consort needed someone to help settle accounts, she should find Chief Steward Mo and Nurse Sunday, otherwise, she should let Qin Feng settle accounts. Why did she let him do such a sissy thing and then let Qin Feng take his position? Yi Li nodded with satisfaction, saying, it's really because he is the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry. When he helps me, he can also be a bodyguard. You guys can also be my assistant. Assistant. An San had a blank face and An had a stupefied expression. What was an assistant? It didn't sound like a shadow guard at all. Yi Li smiled wholeheartedly as she looked at the 2 subordinates that she used very easily. It's the people who will help me deal with everything. Everything? That's right. Everything that I need you to help me deal with. An and An San were smart enough, loyal enough, and skilled enough. An was steady and An San was nimble. After following her for so long, they didn't have the restraint of others. They were simply born to be assistants. Thinking that she could free herself from the heavy chores to do other things that she didn't have time for, Yi Li was in a good mood. Go find Uncle Mo first. Learn what you need to learn in half a month. Otherwise, the next 3 months, the Black Cloud Peak will be your home. I just happened to think of a lot of new things recently. Seeing their master's gentle smile and thinking of the month of struggle in the forest last year, the 2 trembled at the same time. They cleanly turned and left. Hearing the two subordinates run away, Yi Li couldn't help but shake her head with a chuckle. Princess Consort, Yunting Gongzi and Qin Feng Gongzi are asking for an audience. Qing Luan came in to report. Let them in. Yunting's home was near the capital. After leaving Yongju, he parted ways with them. They went east to Guangling, and Yunting went north to return home. At this time, he went to the Prince Ding mansion with Qin Feng, which made Yi Li a little surprised. After a while, the two entered the study side by side. Subordinate Yunting, Qin Feng greets Princess Consort. Yi Li said with a smile, "No need. Yunting, has your home been settled?" Yunting said with a hearty smile, "Many thanks for Princess Consort's concern. Everything is good at home." Yi Li nodded with satisfaction and looked at Qin Feng. Qin Feng respectfully reported, "Subordinate has prepared the things that Princess Consort ordered. I'm just waiting for Princess Consort to personally inspect." Yi Li looked at the few remaining account books on the table and nodded, "It's still early. Let's go now. Yunting, someone will send you to the barracks later. Also, Prince Ding has recommended several military books. Finish them all in 3 months. After 3 months, as long as you pass the test, you can officially become a member of the Mohist army. Understand?" Yunting's eyes lit up. He said in a clear voice, "Yunting understands. I promise I'll finish them all in 3 months." Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded with satisfaction. Yunting was filled with joy. Because of the ecstasy of being able to enter the Mohist army, he forgot to ask how many books there were, and what he was going to do in the barracks in the next 3 months. Because of this, he was not like this for the next 3 months. After changing into men's clothing, Yi Li took Qin Feng out of the Fu with slight anticipation. During this time, they encountered An San, who had just received a large pile of overdue account books from Chief Steward Mo and was currently looking at Qin Feng with a resentful gaze. This caused the leader of the Shadow Guard, who was not used to following Yi Li, to feel an inexplicable chill down his spine. The two left Jing City. Qin Feng looked at the youth in front of him who, other than his lack of height, was still handsome and elegant. He couldn't help but be filled with admiration. He finally understood why when Princess Consort left Jing City, no one could find her. Even the Shadow Guard of the Ding King's Fu could not find any trace of Princess Consort. This kind of disguise was much better than the so-called disguise techniques of the Jianghu. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, even if Princess Consort was standing in front of him, he would have thought that she was a slightly familiar person and let her pass. Chapter 243. Raising her head, she saw Qin Feng's strange gaze. Yi Li smiled and said, "Don't be so shocked, it's just a little disguise." Qin Feng shook his head and said, "Wang Fei's disguise isn't something that just anyone knows. The so-called disguise wasn't just changing one's appearance. True tracking experts might not look at the face or the clothing on a person's body. Rather, it was easy to find clues from a person's habitual movements, figure, back, etc. But just now, when he had followed behind Wang Fei, he didn't find any similarities between Wang Fei's movements when she was dressed as a man and when she was dressed as a woman. Even when Wang Fei was dressed as a man, her walking posture, her expression, and her eyes didn't look like a woman's at all. She looked just like a handsome young master of 14 or 15 years old. Qin Feng didn't know why Wang Fei, as a daughter of a noble family, would know these things, but since the prince trusted Wang Fei, and they had personally seen Wang Fei's abilities in Yonglin City, then he naturally would follow Wang Fei's orders. Qin Feng followed Yi Li on a fast horse to the foot of Black Cloud Peak. Last time, he had come to this place with the prince. But in a year, it had changed a bit. 2 villages stood at the foot of the mountain that was originally somewhat remote and barren. A small village was built on the foundation of the original mountain village on the mountainside. The people at the foot of the mountain were busy working in the fields. It looked no different from the normal villages outside Jing. The two dismounted and went up the mountain. They circled around the village at the foot of the mountain and came to the edge of the cliff at the back of the mountain. Qin Feng looked down. It wasn't very deep. Wang Fei, are we going down? Yi Li looked at him with a smile and said, I heard that your Black Cloud Cavalry's martial arts aren't bad. If you aren't afraid of death, jump down and see. Qin Feng looked suspiciously at the bottom of the cliff and frowned. With his martial arts, even if it wasn't easy to go down, it wouldn't be life-threatening unless there were some traps below. With Yi Li's warning, Qin Feng did not rashly use his qinggong to jump down. Instead, he used something like the wall climbing technique to slowly slide down the cliff. Fortunately, he had a dagger with him. Even if he stuck it into a crack in the rock, he wouldn't have slipped down. With great difficulty, he finally found a protruding spot. Before he could step on it, he discovered that the protruding spot had an arrow tip that was shining with a cold light. Qin Feng had no doubt that he would be turned into a hornet's nest if he were to lightly touch it. Helplessly, he held his dagger and carefully avoided the dangers one by one as he slid down the cliff. Below his feet was a clear lake. There were even green lotus leaves and a few flower buds floating on the surface of the water. However, the various cold glints on the surface of the water were definitely there to mock him. Qin Feng took a deep breath and used his qinggong to cross the lake, not daring to let his feet touch the surface of the water. 3 steps to the left. Yi Li's voice sounded from nearby. Qin Feng, who was about to land, hurriedly took 3 steps to the left before landing on the ground. He tilted his head to look at Wang Fei, who had clearly been waiting for him for a long time. Yi Li looked sardonically at him. She picked up a pebble from the ground and threw it at the spot he had just landed on. Whoosh whoosh. After a fierce rain of arrows came from all directions, Qin Feng looked speechlessly at the place he had just landed on that was filled with arrows. He couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Wang Fei, Qin Feng looked at the smiling and gentle woman in front of him and felt his scalp tingle. He stood where he was and didn't dare to move a step. He didn't want to use his body to test whether or not every inch of the surrounding area was filled with traps. He looked at the clear and quiet lake that did not seem to be dangerous at all. He swore that the sight of the lake filled with arrows was not his imagination. If someone really did not know what was good for them and jumped down using their qinggong, that person would probably become an enormous hedgehog. Yi Li said with a smile, "Don't be nervous. It's just a joke. This place is not like this normally." Qin Feng was silent. He believed that it would be more dangerous normally. Yi Li turned and pointed at the endless forest behind her. She asked with a smile, "Have you been here before?" Qin Feng looked and hesitated before shaking his head. He said, "It is not convenient to train soldiers near Jing. The Black Cloud Cavalry usually train at a place a few hundred li away from Jing. Also, the Black Cloud Cavalry were cavalry. Even if they trained, they would usually train in the wilderness or desert. In the forest, cavalry could not be used at all." Yi Li said with a smile, "When will the person I want arrive?" Qin Feng hesitated. "They should arrive in 2 hours." Qin Feng really did not have much confidence when he said this. Wang Fei had only given him a bunch of maps that could not be any simpler. Also, each map was not the same. Even though the Black Cloud Cavalry were skilled in tracking, he still had to look at the map for a long time before he was able to determine the approximate location. He did not know if the Black Cloud Cavalry would be able to find the place. As for what Wang Fei said about being disqualified if they were discovered by the commoners, Qin Feng did not even think about it. Even if the soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry were new recruits, if they did not want to, they would not be discovered by a group of commoners. How many can they arrive? The Black Cloud Cavalry and the Mohist army near Jing each chose 50 elite soldiers. Even if they cannot all arrive, at least 70 or 80 should not be a problem. Qin Feng thought for a moment and said, "Wang Fei." Qin Feng hesitated but still felt that he should clarify the question that had puzzled him for many days. He was the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Even though he was not the highest commander and only had 2,000 people under him, he still felt that he should be responsible for the elite soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry. If Wang Fei felt that the Shadow Guard was not satisfied, then she should have the Shadow Guard commander train more and choose better ones. Even though transferring 50 elite soldiers would not affect the strength of the Black Cloud Cavalry, what was the use of these soldiers? If they were to be used as shadow guard, 70 or 80 people was clearly too many. Also, the Prince Ding mansion had shadow guards to begin with. If communication was not good, it could easily cause conflict between the shadow guard and the Black Cloud Cavalry. If they were to be used on the battlefield, 70 or 80 people, no matter how elite, would not be of much use. After all, using one person's strength to fight against an army of thousands was the same as throwing their lives away. You are thinking too much. Seeing Qin Feng's hesitation and conflict, Yi Li said with a helpless smile, "Don't worry about this. I also transferred 30 people from the Shadow Guard. Let's see who gets here first. Do you want to make a bet?" Qin Feng thought about how he had heard and San mention Wang Fei's gambling skills in Yonglin. He thought for a moment and said firmly, "Black Cloud Cavalry." Without a doubt, of the three groups, the Black Cloud Cavalry's combat strength and mobility far surpassed the others. Maybe their martial arts were not as good as some people in the Shadow Guard, but their courage had to be known. Other than the Shadow Guard specially trained for the Prince and Wang Fei, not all the other Shadow Guard were strong in martial arts. As for the Black Cloud Cavalry, every single one of them had undergone strict training and were already used to fighting as one. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and said disapprovingly, "I feel that the Shadow Guard will arrive first, followed by the Black Cloud Cavalry, but the Mohist army will have the most people." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.